This series starts with a student named Lee Seung-cheon, who goes to the top private high school in South Korea. The school is filled with students from wealthy families. Some of Seung-cheon's classmates come from especially rich backgrounds. For example, Park Jang-geun is the son of the Army Chief of Staff. Oh Yo-jin is the daughter of a construction company owner, and Kwon Min-ho is the son of the director of Sungbin Hospital. Among all the students, Hwang Tae-yong stands out as the richest. He is the only son of the president-director of the Dasan Group, a company worth more than 300 trillion won. In contrast, Seung-cheon comes from a poor family. His father is unemployed, and his mother works as a maid. To help pay off their debts, Seung-cheon works part-time as a food delivery man and a clerk at a convenience store. When Seung-cheon delivers food to a tutoring center, he also takes study materials to help himself learn. At school, he has a best friend named Jin-suk, who also comes from a poor family. Because of their backgrounds, they are often bullied by Jang-geun and his friends. One day, Seung-cheon hears terrible news. Jin-suk and his father have died because of debt, and their house will be destroyed by the Dasan Group. This news fills Seung-cheon with sadness and regret. He wishes Jin-suk had not given up and chosen to end his life. At the funeral, Tae-yong's father, Hwang Hyun-do, attracts a lot of attention from reporters, especially since news has spread that Jin-suk's family house will be evicted by his company. Hyun-do claims he is there not as someone responsible for Jin-suk's family's death, but as a father who wants to offer his condolences. He announces that the Dasan Group will cover the funeral costs, showing his concern. Seung-cheon feels angry and upset by Hyun-do's attitude toward his best friend's death. After the funeral, Jang-geun and his gang bully Seung-cheon again. From a distance, Tae-yong watches and decides to step in and stop them. Soon, Jang-geun leaves, throwing money at Seung-cheon, who picks it up off the ground. Meanwhile, Tae-yong returns to his car. Inside, Hyun-do sees his son defending Seung-cheon and reminds him to choose friends wisely because he will one day lead the Dasan Group. In the afternoon, Seung-cheon arrives at the convenience store where he works. He is busy showing a new employee, Na Joo-hee, how to use the cash register. Together, they arrange various items on the shelves. Seung-cheon notices that Joo-hee came to the store with a suitcase, which makes him think she might have run away from home. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon's mother, Sun-hae, works at a diner. She suddenly sees on the news that Jin-suk and his family have died. Just then, her older daughter, Sung-hae, calls her with urgent news. Debt collectors are at their house looking for rent money. Sun-hae rushes home to speak with the collectors. At the same time, Seung-cheon's father, Lee Jol, is hiding in a corner of their house. He is an artist who creates comics, but he hasn't been successful for a while, which makes it hard for him to earn money. Later, when Seung-cheon comes home, he tells the debt collectors where his father is hiding. He insists that Lee Jol must take responsibility and deal with their money problems. That night, Lee Jol is seen trying to draw comics online, even though no publishers are interested in his work. Over at Tae-yong's house, he is supposed to study reports from his father's company. Instead, he is captivated by Lee Jol's comic stories. Soon, Hyun-do arrives to check on him, causing Tae-yong to panic. He feels so stressed that he takes medicine to calm down. Meanwhile, Hyun-do is disappointed when he sees Tae-yong's poor study results. He thinks his son is wasting his time instead of studying hard and showing his true potential. A few days later, Seung-cheon visits Tae-yong's house to drop off some schoolwork for Jang-geun. At the same time, some of Seung-cheon's classmates gather there, enjoying the beautiful piano music played by Tae-yong's stepmother, Young-sin. On his way, Seung-cheon sees a crystal ball rolling toward him. It belongs to an old woman selling antiques. As he picks it up to return it, he notices a golden spoon for sale that catches his eye. The grandmother tells him it costs 30,000 won and explains that this golden spoon can change his luck. She claims that if he eats 3 meals using it at the homes of rich people his age, he will become wealthy. Even though Seung-cheon is skeptical about her story, he decides to buy the spoon. When Seung-cheon arrives at Tae-yong's house, he is amazed by how grand it is. The house is big and filled with many servants, making him feel small in comparison. As he enters a room, he sees his friends hanging out with Tae-yong. Young-shin, the first to notice Seung-cheon, is surprised that Tae-yong is friends from a lower social class. After Seung-cheon gives Jang-geun an assignment, Taeyong embarrasses him by paying him in front of everyone, making Seung-cheon feel uncomfortable. Just as Seung-cheon is about to leave, Taeyong invites him to join them for lunch. During lunch, Seung-cheon's friends make fun of his father's job as an unknown comic artist. However, Taeyong is interested in his father's work because he enjoys reading comics online. Soon, the food arrives, and Seung-cheon decides to test the old woman's story about the golden spoon he bought. He hopes to see if it will bring him good luck. The next day, Seung-cheon researches information about the Dawson Group and finds Taeyong looking frustrated with his company reports. Seung-cheon approaches him and offers to help with a report for Taeyong's father. Taeyong's friends are surprised to see him working closely with Seung-cheon, who comes from a different background. However, Seung-cheon's intelligence helps him complete the report successfully. Even Hyun-do, Taeyong's father, is impressed by the work his son presents. Grateful, Taeyong invites Seung-cheon to a fancy restaurant and gives him some money as a thank you gesture. Meanwhile, Yeojin worries that Seung-cheon is taking advantage of Taeyong's kindness to make money. She thinks Seung-cheon might not be sincere. However, Taeyong believes that Seung-cheon really wants to help him and knows how to set boundaries while being friends. Yeojin then mentions Joo-hee, who got kicked out of school in England after causing some trouble. At the convenience store, Joo-hee is talking with Seung-cheon. She learns that he attends a prestigious school and is surprised when he tells her he got in through a scholarship. When Seung-cheon asks about her school, Joo-hee feels pressured to lie. She tells him she was expelled for fighting with bullies at her old school. Soon, the convenience store owner informs Seung-cheon that his friend wants to meet him. When he steps outside, he sees Taeyong waiting for him, holding out some money. Seung-cheon thinks Taeyong is being too generous, but Taeyong insists that he should accept his kindness as a friend. Deep down, Seung-cheon feels that Taeyong may not really want to be friends with him. Joo-hee is surprised to see Seung-cheon with Taeyong, someone she knows. After their meeting, Taeyong heads home. As he walks, he feels envious of Seung-cheon's carefree life. Taeyong's life is packed with busy schedules and obligations, leaving him no time for himself. Once he arrives in his room, Taeyong stares at a photo of his biological mother, feeling a deep sense of longing for her. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon invites Joo-hee to dinner after noticing that she is tired from work. As they talk, Joo-hee realizes that even though Seung-cheon seems cold, he is actually caring. She is impressed by how he is trying to help his family with their financial struggles. When she asks him about his goals, Seung-cheon explains that he works hard for his mother. He dreams of becoming rich so he can make her happy and buy her a nice apartment. The next day, the school announces the list of top students who can enter the university without taking the entrance exam. Seung-cheon feels overjoyed to see his name on the list. However, Jang-geun, who did not make the list, becomes furious. In his anger, he starts hitting Seung-cheon, demanding that he give up his spot. Seung-cheon refuses, leading to even more pain for himself. When Seung-cheon returns to class, his frustration boils over, and he throws his bag onto the floor. As he does, his golden spoon tumbles out. Remembering the old woman's words about the spoon's magic, he decides to visit Taeyong's house to deliver an investment report he has been working on. Still curious about the spoon's powers, Seung-cheon asks Taeyong for a bowl of noodles, claiming he is hungry. Just as he is about to eat, Hyun-do arrives, and Taeyong quickly ushers him outside. Unaware of this, Seung-cheon sneaks back to the dining table and starts eating the noodles with his golden spoon. Suddenly, Hyun-do and his wife walk in and catch him in the act. Feeling embarrassed, Seung-cheon apologizes and hurriedly leaves the house. On his way home, Seung-cheon feels foolish for his actions and decides to throw his golden spoon in the trash, disappointed that it didn't bring him any magic. Meanwhile, Jang-geun calls Hyun-do to tell him that Seung-cheon has been helping Taeyong complete all the company reports he was given. Hearing this, Hyun-do is shocked and furious. He calls Taeyong and threatens to punish him by sending him to study abroad. Taeyong, who has painful memories of his childhood in America, begs his father not to send him away. He promises to do anything to make up for it. Hyun-do agrees, but demands that Taeyong expel Seung-cheon from school. Under pressure from his father, Taeyong and his stepmother go to the school the next day and report that Seung-cheon has been blackmailing him. They present fake evidence, leading to Seung-cheon and his parents being summoned to the principal's office, where they are threatened with expulsion. Seung-cheon explains that the money he received was given willingly by Tae-yong. However, instead of defending him, Tae-yong turns against Seung-cheon. After the meeting, Lee Jal kneels before Tae-yong, begging for his son's forgiveness. Meanwhile, it is Juhi's first day at this new school. Many of her classmates are amazed to see her, knowing she is the daughter of a famous TV entrepreneur. She seems friendly with Yo-jin, who previously attended the same middle school. After a while, Juhi notices a group of students gathered together and becomes curious. When she sees Lee Jal kneeling in front of Tae-yong, apologizing for Seung-cheon's mistake, she feels something is wrong. She knows that Seung-cheon is a good young man and wouldn't blackmail anyone. That night, it starts to rain. Seung-cheon asks Tae-yong to meet him by the lake. He wants to know why Tae-yong betrayed him. Tae-yong admits he had to lie because his father pressured him. Seung-cheon reveals that he recorded their conversation, planning to use it as proof at school. When Tae-yong realizes this, he panics and tries to grab the recording. In the struggle, Seung-cheon falls into the lake. Tae-yong considers calling the police for help, but he worries that if they find Seung-cheon, he will get into even bigger trouble. Fearing the consequences, he decides to leave, abandoning Seung-cheon, who might drown. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon starts to lose consciousness in the water. Suddenly, he remembers the chance to use his golden spoon. Gathering all his strength, he swims to the surface and manages to survive. Afterward, he rushes to find the gold spoon he threw away. Next, Seung-cheon goes to Tae-yong's house and meets Hyun-do. He asks to have one last meal before he gets kicked out of school. Hyun-do agrees and invites him to eat. Without hesitation, Seung-cheon digs into the food using his golden spoon, while Hyun-do watches silently from his seat. On his way home, Tae-yong feels guilty about leaving Seung-cheon behind. He asks his driver, Mun-ki, to stop the car. Then he walks back toward the lake to try and save Seung-cheon. At Tae-yong's house, Seung-cheon finishes his meal, hoping for a miracle from the golden spoon. To test it, he calls Hyun-do daddy, but Hyun-do doesn't respond. Seung-cheon apologizes, feeling like he has failed, and plans to head home. Just then, Juhi arrives at Tae-yong's house to ask about Seung-cheon's situation. Known as Tae-yong's fiancée, she is invited in by the maids. As Seung-cheon is about to leave, Juhi suddenly approaches him and slaps him, calling out Tae-yong's name. Hyun-do, who is still present, steps forward and asks Juhi what his son has been doing. Hearing the news, Seung-cheon finally understands that everyone thinks he is Tae-yong. His life has switched with Tae-yong's, just as he had always wanted. Juhi sees Hyun-do and greets him warmly after not visiting for a long time. She explains that she came to talk to Tae-yong about the rumors spreading about Seung-cheon. Soon, Youngsun arrives and tells Hyun-do that the police are looking for Tae-yong. They want to investigate the disappearance of a student named Seung-cheon near the lake. Hyun-do quickly contacts his lawyer, Mr. Go, to accompany his son during the investigation. At the police station, Seung-cheon, now mistaken for Tae-yong, explains that he only had a fight with his friend by the lake. Meanwhile, Mr. Go tries to protect his client from any tough questions. The police show a video of Tae-yong trying to save Seung-cheon before he fell into the lake. When Seung-cheon sees the video, he feels happy because it shows that he and Tae-yong have truly swapped places. At the same time, a police officer in charge of the case gets a phone call from someone urging the police to handle the investigation carefully. Meanwhile, around the lake, police search for Seung-cheon. His family is in a panic after hearing about his disappearance, and they rush to the police station to find out what happened. When Seung-cheon sees his family there, they mistakenly believe he is Tae-yong. Outside the police station, Mun-ki looks worried when he sees Seung-cheon. Earlier, Tae-yong had suddenly gotten out of the car. Seung-cheon uses Mun-ki's phone to try to reach his own phone, which he dropped near the lake. Someone in a raincoat answers, but doesn't say anything. Not long after, Seung-cheon sees his family coming out of the police station. They have just learned that their son has been found. They quickly head to the hospital to see him, but the son they find is actually Tae-yong, who everyone now believes is Seung-cheon. When Tae-yong wakes up, he sees a family waiting for him, including a woman who claims to be his mother. At that moment, Seung-cheon rushes to the hospital searching for Taeyong. Upon hearing the news, Seung-cheon was shocked and wondered if Taeyong had figured out that their lives had switched. Meanwhile, Sung-ae, who recognizes Taeyong as her brother Seung-cheon, feels something is off. She finds it strange that he is calling himself someone else. After visiting Taeyong, Seung-cheon quickly asks Hyun-do to withdraw the blackmail report made to the school so he won't be expelled. In his study, Hyun-do orders his staff to search for witnesses who might have taken photos of his son at the lake. He wants to make sure his son doesn't get into trouble. When Seung-cheon returns to Taeyong's house, he is amazed by the luxury surrounding him. He decides to act confidently so no one suspects anything. Soon, he meets Mun-ki, who gives him the house plans and a list of the employees working there. Mun-ki is surprised by Seung-cheon's new attitude, but he thinks Taeyong must be feeling different because of a tough day. As Mun-ki leaves, Seung-cheon admires Taeyong's fancy room. He notices that the pictures on the walls have changed to show him instead. While examining the golden spoon, he sees the number 30 on the handle change to 29 as the clock strikes midnight. He realizes this number represents the days left until he might return to being poor Seung-cheon. The next day, Seung-cheon leaves for school as Taeyong. However, he still feels uncomfortable around Jang-geun and his snob friends. That day, he learns that Joo-hee is the daughter of the owner of a famous TV station. Moments later, the principal calls Seung-cheon to discuss the blackmail issue from the other day. During the meeting, Seung-cheon learns that both the principal and Mrs. Kim know that Taeyong deliberately set him up to get expelled from school. During a break, Jang-geun and his friends are bullying another student. Seung-cheon steps in and punches Jang-geun to defend the boy being picked on. Jang-geun, feeling weaker, can't fight back against Seung-cheon, who is now acting as Taeyong. Seung-cheon even gives his phone number to the bullied student, telling him to call if Jang-geun bothers him again. Jang-geun is upset and shocked by the change in Taeyong. Meanwhile, Joo-hee sees Seung-cheon as Taeyong and takes him to the roof of the school. She asks him to stop bothering Seung-cheon, showing her care and concern for him. After Joo-hee leaves, Yeojin approaches Seung-cheon and tells him she is still hurt because he once called her a lowly woman. She also mentions that Joo-hee was involved in a student's death back in middle school. Seung-cheon doesn't seem affected by this and walks away. At the same time, Taeyong wakes up at Seung-cheon's house and suddenly remembers he has a dinner scheduled with his father. Lee Jol and his wife try to calm him down and suggest he rest some more. On the other side, Seung-cheon is trying to follow Hyun-do's strict rules. Hyun-do is a perfectionist, so Seung-cheon is careful not to make mistakes in any reports he prepares for him. Now living as Taeyong, Seung-cheon buys expensive gifts for his family. Meanwhile, Taeyong, who is experiencing Seung-cheon's life, discovers he actually enjoys the comics created by Lee Jol. This surprises Seung-cheon's real family, who thought Taeyong found his father's comics boring. Sung-ae asks their parents if her brother has forgotten things after the accident. When dinner is ready, Taeyong, who initially looked down on the food, finds himself very hungry and exclaims that Seung-cheon's mother's cooking is the best he has ever tasted. After finishing dinner, the Hwang family servants come to Seung-cheon's house to deliver gifts as an apology. Elsewhere, before having dinner with his son, Hyun-do reminds him not to waste money and hopes that Taeyong can become someone who is not influenced by wealth. Later that evening, during dinner, Seung-cheon discovers that Hyun-do has invited Joo-hee and her father, Na Sang-guk, to join them. He learns that Joo-hee is actually Taeyong's fiancée. Joo-hee shares that she wants to end her engagement with Taeyong because she wants the freedom to enjoy her life while still in school. After returning home with her father, her older stepbrother, Gum-sak, gets angry with her. He tells her that his company is facing bankruptcy because Hyun-do canceled his investment after Joo-hee broke off her engagement with Taeyong. Joo-hee's father tries to calm the situation and advises her to think carefully before making a final decision about ending her engagement. Meanwhile, when Seung-cheon returns to his room, he is surprised to find Young-sin going through his things. When caught, she claims she was only looking for school exam materials. After she leaves, Seung-cheon looks for his golden spoon and accidentally discovers a photo of Taeyong with his biological mother. At Jang-geun's house, he is getting punished by his father for cheating at school and failing to make the top student list. Jang-geun suspects that Seung-cheon reported him, and he plans to get back at Seung-cheon. The next morning, Sung-ae tries to convince her mother not to return all the luxury items they received the night before. However, since her father and brother agree to return them, she gives in and hands the items over to her mother. After breakfast, Tae-yong says goodbye to Seung-cheon's father as he leaves for school. Lee-jol gives him some pocket money, but Tae-yong thinks it's too little. Despite this, he thanks Lee-jol and walks to school. As Lee-jol returns home, he feels regret for not providing a better life for his family. When he sees a flyer for construction jobs, he decides to take it. Later, Sun-hae meets Seung-cheon at the Hwang family's house to return all the luxury items they were given. Although Seung-cheon, now wealthy, had prepared a check to pay off all his family's debts, Sun-hae refuses the money. She explains that money cannot buy their family's pride and asks him to stay away from them. Seung-cheon is left speechless, knowing his mother does not want to take advantage of anyone's kindness. At school, Seung-cheon, pretending to be Tae-yong, is welcomed back happily by his friends. Jui is also glad to see him after a long time. After school, she invites him to sit in a park to chat. Later, Jang-geun and his friends go to Tae-yong and ask him to come to his house. When they arrive, Jang-geun and his group start to beat Tae-yong badly. Meanwhile, Hyun-do is seen signing a document related to Tae-yong. At the same time, Jui is at a columbarium, unaware that a mysterious man is watching her. Seung-cheon arrives at the columbarium and rushes to Jin-suk's ashes to pay his respects to his best friend. Moments later, Seung-cheon gets a call from a friend who tells him that Jang-geun has taken Tae-yong away. Worried for Tae-yong's safety, he quickly heads to Jang-geun's house. When Seung-cheon arrives at Jang-geun's house, he starts fighting Jang-geun to make him stop bothering Tae-yong. He then takes Jang-geun's father's gun and uses it to scare Jang-geun. Outside, Mun-ki hears gunshots coming from inside the house. After the noise, Seung-cheon goes to Hyun-do's office to explain what happened at Jang-geun's house. Since Hyun-do is in a meeting, Seung-cheon waits in his study and starts reading the will, which states that all of Hyun-do's assets will not be given to Tae-yong. When Hyun-do enters the study, Seung-cheon tells him that he's caused a problem and assures him not to worry about it. Shortly after, Jang-geun's father calls Hyun-do, just as Seung-cheon expected. Seung-cheon listens as Hyun-do answers the phone according to his son's wishes. Later, Seung-cheon visits Jang-geun in the hospital, where he is being treated for an injured hand. Jang-geun's mother is angry at Seung-cheon for hurting her son. However, she stops when Seung-cheon explains that he didn't shoot Jang-geun. Instead, Jang-geun injured his hand by falling in shock after hearing the gunshot. Seung-cheon then mentions that Jang-geun often bullies other students at school, and he wants to teach him a lesson. He warns Jang-geun's mother that if they want to dispute the shooting incident, he will tell the police that Jang-geun's father owns a gun illegally. Soon after, Seung-cheon drives Tae-yong home, noticing that he looks scared. Mun-ki, who is with them, points out that Tae-yong has a habit of biting his nails when he feels anxious, reminding them of his young master's nervousness. Seung-cheon's kindness makes Tae-yong feel grateful. However, Seung-cheon explains that he feels guilty because Tae-yong had to take his place and was beaten up by Jang-geun. When they arrive at Seung-cheon's family home, they find the landlord waiting. The landlord kicks Seung-cheon's family out for being behind on rent for 3 months. Lee-jol tries to negotiate with the debt collectors, asking to let his family stay and promising to repay the rent. He even offers to clean the landlord's shoes for 20,000 won. From a distance, Seung-cheon watches his father cleaning the landlord's shoes and feels embarrassed. He decides to leave. On his way home, he thinks that switching lives was the right choice because he is ashamed of having such a useless father. He also feels pressured to find a way to change Hyun-do's will. At the convenience store, Jui rushes in, late for her shift. Meanwhile, the man who followed her to the columbarium watches her from across the street, showing a dislike for her. At the hospital, Jang-geun is upset after hearing that the Dawson Group's fortunes are improving. In frustration, he turns off the television. Yo-jin, who is there with him, excitedly talks about Tae-yong's birthday coming up next week, which annoys Jang-geun even more. She also mentions that Tae-yong and Seung-cheon share the same birthday, calling it a strange coincidence. The next day, Lee-jol is forced to work as a laborer on an eviction project. dealing with residents who are opposed to being moved. The project manager scolds Lee Jal, who looks nervous while doing the demolition work. Lee Jal hides his new job from his wife, telling her that he works at a publishing house as a comic artist. Meanwhile, Sun-hae is busy searching for a new place for their family in case they have to move. At night, Lee Jal is resting when he accidentally meets a man named Jong Weenum, who has been following Joo-hee. Weenum had recently been released from prison after his life fell apart when he lost his daughter 5 years ago. Lee Jal finds Weenum's wallet, which has a photo of his daughter inside, but Weenum quickly snatches it back. 1 week later, Lee Jal finally receives his paycheck and plans to buy a birthday cake for Seung-cheon. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon, now living as Tae-yong, is at Tae-yong's house enjoying various luxurious gifts from Hyun-do's family and friends. Moon-ki carries a stock certificate to give to Hyun-do at the birthday party. At the same time, Joo-hee is trying to find the address of Seung-cheon's family home. She asks an old woman who sells antiques for directions. The old woman surprisingly knows Seung-cheon and provides the address. The old lady also gives Joo-hee a letter to deliver to Seung-cheon's friend, Tae-yong. Joo-hee takes the letter without questioning it. At Seung-cheon's family home, Sun-hae is busy cooking seaweed soup for her son's birthday. Although Tae-yong has never eaten seaweed soup on his birthday, he feels grateful to have a mother who loves him so much. He even refuses to take money from Sun-hae, saying that a mother's love is the most valuable thing he can receive. Sun-hae is overjoyed to hear this, as she thought her son would forget her love as he grew older. Suddenly, they are surprised by Joo-hee's arrival, who wishes Seung-cheon a happy birthday and gives him a gift. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon, now in Tae-yong's life, is enjoying a lavish birthday party with Hyun-do's family and friends. He presents Hyun-do with the stock certificate, which he bought with his pocket money. Seeing his son interested in business makes Hyun-do feel proud. Sang-guk is also surprised by how much Tae-yong has changed from being lazy to enthusiastic. Shortly after, Sang-guk calls Joo-hee and invites her to the birthday party. Seung-cheon greets all of Hyun-do's business associates, checking the list of names he prepared earlier to study. Not long after, Yeojin approaches Seung-cheon, noting that the Tae-yong she knows seems very different. He greets businessmen by their full names and has even prepared a gift for his father. Yeojin finds it strange that Tae-yong is now inviting schoolmates who are not close friends. Ji, under pressure from her father, finally arrives at the party. When she sees Tae-yong, whom she knows as Seung-cheon, she is surprised. Later, Young-sin asks the fake Tae-yong to entertain the guests by playing the piano. Seung-cheon panics because he doesn't know how to play. Suddenly, however, Tae-yong, now known as Seung-cheon, starts playing the piano beautifully, impressing everyone with his skill. In that moment, Seung-cheon realizes that even though their lives have switched, their talents and habits remain the same. Seung-cheon then finds a letter from the old antique dealer addressed to Joo-hee. When he opens it, he is shocked to learn that according to the rules of the Golden Spoon, he and Tae-yong can return to their real lives if they meet their parents on their birthdays. Realizing his plan could fail if Tae-yong meets Hyun-do, Seung-cheon rushes to find him. Finally, Seung-cheon spots Tae-yong near the elevator. At the same time, Hyun-do approaches, so Seung-cheon distracts his father by hugging him and expressing how grateful he is to be his only son. Once he realizes Tae-yong has left, Seung-cheon stays with Hyun-do. At night, Joo-hee feels strange around Seung-cheon because he asks her for help with an assignment. She is also surprised to find out that Seung-cheon likes wine and can play the piano, just like Tae-yong. Soon after, her father arrives and warns Joo-hee not to spend time with Seung-cheon. He advises her to choose friends who are on the same social level as their family. Suddenly, Sang-guk mentions a girl named Nara, a friend of Joo-hee's from a poor family who was caught stealing an expensive watch in middle school. Joo-hee feels upset because her father brings up this painful memory, especially since Nara has passed away. At home, Young-sin complains that she was annoyed by Seung-cheon's piano playing at Tae-yong's birthday party. She expresses her dislike for Tae-yong being so close to Seung-cheon. Hyun-do then talks about his will, stating that the heir to his company doesn't have to be his son. He believes the heir should be someone who can protect his wealth and the Dawson Group. After their conversation, Young-sin makes a phone call. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon, just arriving in his room, feels worried because the letter about the golden spoon from the old antique dealer has gone missing. He realizes that the letter probably fell at the party while he was searching for Taeyong. The next day, Seung-cheon visits Joo-hee to ask where she met the old woman who sells antiques. Joo-hee explains how she encountered the old lady before meeting his family. Upon hearing this, Seung-cheon tries to stop Joo-hee from visiting his poor family. She gets irritated and insists that Seung-cheon, whom she knows as Taeyong, should not insult his family because she likes Seung-cheon no matter what. This makes him uncomfortable. At Seung-cheon's family home, Taeyong finds a birthday cake that Lee Jaw left for him. The note says he is sorry for not being able to celebrate his son's birthday with him. He also promises to work hard to make life better for his children. That night, Moon-ki reveals that Seung-cheon's family is in danger of eviction if they don't pay their rent soon. Seung-cheon has a plan to help his family, and Moon-ki feels relieved that his young master has become wiser and is overcoming his past trauma from events in America. Curious about what happened to Taeyong in America 5 years ago, Seung-cheon recalls that one of the maids at the Huang family house, Miss Gong, gives him medicine every day. Meanwhile, young Sin tries to persuade Miss Gong to help her find someone who can keep an eye on Taeyong because she is very worried about how he is doing. A few days later, Moon-ki learns more about On Moo-in, the rent collector who used to visit Seung-cheon's family. He discovers that On Moo-in and his group are actually gangsters in the area. With evidence of their criminal activities, Moon-ki and Seung-cheon head to On Moo-in's office to negotiate. However, their arrival is not welcomed, and Moon-ki, skilled in martial arts, has to fight and defeat all the gangsters. Eventually, On Moo-in agrees to follow Seung-cheon's orders to avoid being reported to the police. Soon after, Seung-cheon and Moon-ki watch as On Moo-in and some of his men visit Seung-cheon's family to apologize. On Moo-in then offers to let Seung-cheon's family pay the rent for their home. Seung-cheon feels relieved because his family will not know that he helped them. On the way home, Seung-cheon feels guilty. He realizes he has traded his parents' love and support for the luxury of living in the Taeyong family. Elsewhere, a homeless woman searches for the old lady who sells antiques. She wants to return the golden spoon she had borrowed. The next day at school, Seung-cheon feels jealous when he sees how close Joo-hee and Taeyong have become. That night, he visits the convenience store and watches Joo-hee while she works. He becomes suspicious when he notices Weenum, who appears to be watching Joo-hee while he is drunk. As Joo-hee walks home after work, Weenum follows her and tries to hurt her. He seeks revenge for the death of his daughter, Nara, and wants to threaten Joo-hee's father for money as compensation. Meanwhile, worried about Joo-hee's safety, Seung-cheon repeatedly calls her, but she doesn't answer. He rushes after her, fearing that she will be harmed by the man outside the convenience store. When Seung-cheon hears Joo-hee scream, he quickly runs to help her and tries to catch Weenum. Unfortunately, Weenum knocks him down and escapes. Afterward, Joo-hee tells Seung-cheon that the man is Nara's father, seeking revenge because his daughter was expelled from school for stealing a watch, even though the watch was returned. Joo-hee explains that she couldn't forgive Nara because the watch was a gift from her late mother. After being expelled, Nara was diagnosed with leukemia and passed away. To this day, Joo-hee feels guilty and regrets not forgiving Nara for her mistake. Seung-cheon tries to comfort her, assuring her that Nara's death is not her fault. Some time passes, and Seung-cheon is now trying to win Hyeon-do's favor so that his father will agree to change his will. He pleads with Hyeon-do to modify the will's contents and plans to attend the shareholders' meeting. Seung-cheon assures Hyeon-do that he will do his best to inherit the Dawson Group. Hyeon-do looks pleased, thinking that the will left on his desk might change Taeyong's behavior. One day in class, Seung-cheon accidentally finds a note from the gold spoon saleswoman tucked inside his book. Shortly after, he receives a message on his cell phone from an unknown number. The message claims that the sender knows he is not the real Taeyong. Shocked, Seung-cheon realizes someone knows his secret. He suspects his classmates, but has no proof. Moments later, Taeyong walks in while playing with his cell phone. Seung-cheon's suspicions seem unfounded when he calls the number, and Taeyong's phone doesn't ring. Instead, it's Joo-hee's phone that goes off. During break, Seung-cheon checks the letter again, and is surprised to find it missing. He visits one of his friends, who admits that he found the envelope empty at a previous birthday party and put it in Seung-cheon's textbook. Seung-cheon begins to suspect that one of his friends is also switching lives using a golden spoon. He grows increasingly suspicious of Joo-hee, especially since she is friendly with everyone despite coming from a rich family. Learning about her past with Nara only adds to his doubts, especially since she was the one who delivered the letter. To confirm his suspicions, Seung-cheon secretly searches through Joo-hee's bag for her cell phone. Meanwhile, Joo-hee is with Yo-jin, who warns her to stay away from Taeyong. While listening to Yo-jin, Joo-hee suddenly remembers that she left her phone in class and rushes back to get it. When she arrives, she is shocked to find Seung-cheon, pretending to be Taeyong, rummaging through her bag. Seung-cheon quickly explains that he wants to find out who called Joo-hee before class. She tells him her father called her that morning, and he apologizes for his behavior. Later, as Seung-cheon sits on the bleachers at the sports field, he reads the message again. Suddenly, Taeyong appears and starts reading the message over his shoulder. He asks if Seung-cheon sent it. When Seung-cheon asks, Taeyong replies that he didn't send the message and warns him to stay away from Joo-hee. At dinner, Young-sin eats with Seung-cheon and suggests he should focus more on studying rather than a shareholder meeting. He dismisses her advice, but notices that she seems surprised when she sees him drinking coffee, something Taeyong used to avoid. Sometime later, Seung-cheon calls Joo-hee to the police station because Weenum has been caught. The police report says he was reported by a student named Yo-jin for sneaking into her house to express his longing for his late daughter, Nara. Joo-hee explains that Nara's family has been renting a room at Yo-jin's house for several years. Seung-cheon, wanting to learn more about Nara's death, invites Yo-jin to the columbarium. He suspects that Yo-jin might be connected to Nara, as Joo-hee mentioned that Yo-jin has been sick since middle school. When they arrive at the columbarium, Seung-cheon asks Yo-jin about Nara. Yo-jin admits she was not very close to Nara, even though her family rented a room at her house. Suddenly, Yo-jin looks sad when Seung-cheon asks why she reported Weenum to the police. She confesses that Weenum often abused Nara while she was alive. Just as Yo-jin is about to leave, she stops in her tracks when Seung-cheon calls her Nara. She seems annoyed by this and accuses him of being the one who sent her mysterious messages. Meanwhile, Joo-hee looks at a picture of herself with Yo-jin and Nara from middle school. Soon after, she receives a message saying she is not the real Joo-hee. The next day, Taeyong and his friends receive similar messages. Finally, Jang-gun admits he sent the message as a joke using his mother's phone to prank his classmates. Not long after, Jang-gun sees Taeyong eating ice cream with a regular spoon. He teases Taeyong, now known as Seung-cheon, for not using a golden spoon. Seung-cheon becomes worried by Jang-gun's comments. Meanwhile, Taeyong, although he struggles to remember, recalls that he had used the golden spoon before. At dinner with Seung-cheon's family, Taeyong asks Sun-hae and Sung-hae about the gold spoon, but they don't know what he's talking about. He tries to find the gold spoon in his room, but discovers it is missing. He realizes it must be left at his old house. The next day, Seung-cheon, accompanied by Mun-ki, goes to meet on Moon to buy an apartment for his real family, as he has only 7 days left to change lives. As they leave, someone is secretly watching them and reports this to Young-sin, who is waiting for someone to arrive. On his way home, Seung-cheon encounters a protest against evictions blocking the road. He is shocked to see his real father, Lee Jol, among the eviction workers. He stops the car and gets out to meet Lee Jol. Seung-cheon approaches Lee Jol, who is being treated harshly by his superiors. Lee Jol recognizes him as Taeyong and asks him to keep their meeting a secret from his family. Seeing his father working as a laborer makes Seung-cheon very sad. He feels sorry for him and disappointed with his father's situation. Just then, Joo-hee invites him to dinner, which lifts his spirits. She treats him with her earnings from working at the convenience store as a thank you for all the help he has given her. During dinner, Seung-cheon notices that the Taeyong Joo-hee knows seems more mature now. From their conversation, he learns that 5 years ago, Taeyong experienced a traumatic shooting incident in America that left him with a panic disorder. They continue their chat over coffee in the garden, discussing their engagement. Suddenly, Joo-hee suggests that they should cancel the engagement when they turn 20. Seung-cheon, however, refuses to accept this because he likes her and wants to win her heart. Meanwhile, Taeyong visits the Huang family's house to check if his gold spoon was left there. When he arrives, he meets Young-sin and asks if he can wait for Seung-cheon, who is also known as Taeyong. As Young-sin accompanies Taeyong, she is surprised to see that the young man she knows as Seung-cheon enjoys drinks, speaks French fluently, and plays the piano just like Taeyong. Young-sin offers to have dinner together, but Taeyong declines, saying he is not used to eating at other people's homes. This surprises her, because Seung-cheon had eaten there several times before. Taeyong, thinking he is Seung-cheon, waits in Taeyong's room and starts searching for the gold spoon. While looking, he finds a photo of his biological mother that he no longer recognizes. On the other hand, Seung-cheon, knowing that Taeyong is in his room, feels panicked and rushes there. He is angry and snatches the gold spoon from Taeyong's hands, scolding him for searching through other people's things without permission. Taeyong thinks Seung-cheon is overreacting and decides to leave. As he steps outside, Taeyong encounters Hyun-do, which triggers his panic attack. He quickly excuses himself and heads home. On the way, his panic worsens, and he tries to call Lee Jal, who is at work. Soon, Lee Jal arrives to meet him at a pedestrian bridge. Seeing his son lying there, helpless, Lee Jal helps him regulate his breathing so he can calm down. Meanwhile, Young-sin tells Hyun-do about Seung-cheon's behavior, which is very similar to Taeyong's. She shows him proof that an apartment has been purchased in Taeyong's name, making her worry that Seung-cheon is taking advantage of Taeyong. Hearing this, Hyun-do calls Mun-ki to discuss the search for witnesses to the fight at the lake. Mun-ki reports that the police are still having trouble finding witnesses. Hyun-do suspects that Mun-ki is hiding the friendship between Taeyong and Seung-cheon since he didn't mention the apartment purchase. That night, Yo-jin watches Weenum, who is about to be transferred to prison, and calls him Daddy. This confirms Seung-cheon's suspicion that Yo-jin is involved with the golden spoon. She is also a witness who saw Seung-cheon and Taeyong fighting at the lake. To destroy evidence, she throws Seung-cheon's cell phone into the lake and takes Taeyong's phone. Meanwhile, at Hyun-do's house, Young-sin's younger brother, Jun-tae, returns from America and greets Hyun-do and Seung-cheon. However, Hyun-do doesn't seem very fond of him. One day, Seung-cheon discovers that Jun-tae has a bad temper. Jun-tae strangles him, claiming that Seung-cheon is being rude by looking directly at him. Seung-cheon realizes that, like his father, Taeyong is also under pressure from his abusive uncle. Because of this, he plans to return to his old house. However, when he sees that his family seems to be doing fine without him, he decides to leave. Meanwhile, Sung-ae tells her family that she has been offered an apartment that Taeyong's chauffeur, Mun-ki, can rent at a low price. Hearing this makes Taeyong suspicious. He wonders if Mun-ki is acting on orders from Seung-cheon, who is now known as Taeyong. On the other hand, Lee Jal admires Taeyong's drawing talent. A few days later, he returns to work on a demolition project. However, this project is disrupted by riots as residents protest the evictions, injuring several workers, including him. At another location, Seung-cheon prepares to go to school while checking the number on his gold spoon. He realizes that today is the last day he will exchange fortunes with Taeyong. At school, he encounters Taeyong and is shocked to learn that the apartment Mun-ki offered to Sung-ae actually belongs to him. Seung-cheon thinks Taeyong is foolish for not wanting wealth. Taeyong insists that he will not change his parents, even though they are poor. Suddenly, Joo-hee arrives with Taeyong's cell phone, which keeps ringing in the classroom. When they find out that Lee Jal is in the hospital, they hurry to go see him. Upon arriving at the hospital, Seung-cheon rushes to his father and calls out to Lee Jal as dad. Just then, Hyun-do appears from behind the curtains, making Seung-cheon worry that someone will discover his secret. Meanwhile, Yo-jin is seen looking at the missing letter from Seung-cheon. She keeps it in a safe along with her golden spoon. Years ago, Yo-jin, living as Nara, had to endure life with her abusive, drunken father, Weenum, while the real Yo-jin suffered from leukemia. One day, Nara encounters an old woman who sells gold spoons. In a surprising twist, Nara's life is exchanged for Yo-jin's, meaning that Yo-jin, who has been sick, must now die as Nara takes her place. Yo-jin's parents have forgotten about her serious illness, which suddenly improves, allowing Nara to live as Yeojin from that point onward. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Seung-cheon tries to cover up his actions so that Hyun-do doesn't become suspicious of him. He claims he heard about Hyun-do being hospitalized and was worried, thinking that Hyun-do was the one who was sick. After Hyun-do takes him home, Seung-cheon insists on staying to help improve the public image of Hyun-do's company, especially since many reporters are covering Lee Jol's situation. Seung-cheon's wise attitude impresses Hyun-do and Mr. Go, who notice the changes in the Taeyong they know. As Taeyong, Seung-cheon knows he cannot get too close to Lee Jol in front of his family. Suddenly, Lee Jol's condition worsens, and he needs surgery. Seung-cheon feels guilty, thinking this is a punishment for choosing wealth over his family. Feeling sad, Seung-cheon returns to the Hyun-do residence, intending to leave with some money. However, Juntae blocks his way and takes the gold spoon that Seung-cheon brought. They end up fighting, causing the money Seung-cheon had to scatter across the floor. After the struggle with Juntae, Seung-cheon sees the old woman who sells gold spoons again. He asks her to help him return to his former life. The old woman tells him he must go back to his old house and eat with the golden spoon. She warns him that they will meet again in 1 year, giving him a chance to switch places again. Seung-cheon realizes he doesn't want to be rich at the cost of his family. At the hospital, Lee Jol's surgery is finished, and Sun-hae asks Taeyong to come home. Taeyong agrees, but as he prepares to leave, he notices that his mother's socks have holes in them. He decides to buy her new socks. Meanwhile, Sung-hae arrives home and is surprised to see Seung-cheon eating rice without any side dishes. When she calls him Seung-cheon, he feels relieved. Seeing her brother in distress, Sung-hae hugs Seung-cheon and tries to comfort him. Just then, Taeyong returns with the new socks and is confused about why Seung-cheon is there. Seung-cheon then rushes to the hospital to see his father. He finds Lee Jol awake and embraces his mother, apologizing. Soon after, he learns that his father has regained consciousness, and he feels a wave of happiness wash over him. The next day, Jui brings Seung-cheon food and a motivational book. This makes him happy because he feels noticed for who he really is. Meanwhile, Taeyong is back in his luxurious life and dreams of having breakfast with his mother. However, it is Moon-ki who wakes him up instead. Taeyong struggles to believe that his mother has died, especially since he had just begun to feel her love again. At breakfast, Hyun-do asks about the apartment Taeyong bought earlier. When Juntae and Young-sin accuse Seung-cheon's family of taking advantage of Taeyong's wealth, he becomes angry and defends them. In the end, Hyun-do takes charge of the apartment issue. After breakfast, Juntae seems irritated with Taeyong for standing up to him. However, he doesn't resist when his uncle tries to intimidate him. Luckily, Moon-ki arrives, causing Juntae to leave. Moon-ki can only do so much to help Taeyong because he is focused on Young-sin. He apologizes to Taeyong for not keeping the apartment purchase a secret. Meanwhile, Taeyong tries to remember why he bought the apartment and wonders about the socks he keeps in his trouser pockets. Turning to Seung-cheon's family, they now face a new problem. The head of the contractor demands that Lee Jol pay 100 million won to repair a damaged company car. At school, Yeojin is curious about Seung-cheon, who has been using the golden spoon for a month. She notices that Taeyong seems to have returned to a normal life. In class, Joo-hee listens to a friend who is calling Seung-cheon about his financial troubles. The head of the contractor is asking for compensation for the company car that was damaged during a protest. In the restroom, Sun-hae sits alone, feeling hopeless. She cries in frustration because she worries about involving her children in her debt. Soon, she sees a pamphlet advertising the sale of organs for a high price. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon plans to sell Taeyong's watch, which he still wears. When he goes to a watch shop, the owner kicks him out, claiming the watch is fake. Seung-cheon discovers that Juntae had traded all of Taeyong's watches for counterfeit ones. Disappointed, he finally throws the watch in the trash. The next day, Sun-hae is at the hospital for a medical examination before her operation to sell her kidney. To keep her family from becoming suspicious, she tells them she will be out of town for a week to borrow money from a friend. While at the park, Sun-hae is on the phone discussing the kidney sale. Seung-cheon overhears her conversation and forbids her from going through with it. He promises to find a way to repay their debts. Soon after, Seung-cheon meets with Ha-do to ask for a loan. However, Ha-do cannot lend him any money because Seung-cheon has no collateral and Lee Jaul's medical expenses are already covered by the company. Meanwhile, Joo-hee decides to sell her luxury bags to help Seung-cheon after her father refuses to give her the money. By evening, she has earned some money from the sales and plans to give it to him. At the same time, Yeojin arrives and hands Seung-cheon a check first. She then hugs him, knowing that Joo-hee is watching. Later, all the students graduate from high school, and Taeyong treats his friends to drinks to celebrate the occasion. Joo-hee is there, but doesn't seem to enjoy the party because Seung-cheon is not present. After the party, Yeojin asks Seung-cheon to pick her up so that Joo-hee and her classmates think they are close. He feels pressure to agree. Meanwhile, Taeyong notices that Joo-hee is going home alone, so he decides to walk her home. During their walk, they discuss their official engagement. Surprisingly, Seung-cheon and his family find themselves under the control of Yeojin's father, Dong-pil, after receiving financial help to pay off their debts. Seeing her father mistreating Seung-cheon's family, Yeojin gets angry and reminds him that she promised to marry Taeyong. Hearing this, her father agrees to be nicer to Seung-cheon and his family. Back in his room, Seung-cheon counts his savings and realizes he doesn't have enough to apply to university. He also decides to give up on his dream of becoming rich with a golden spoon after seeing it still sitting in his savings box. Meanwhile, Taeyong is visited by a psychiatrist who helps him manage his anxiety. The doctor notes that Taeyong has improved significantly over the past year. He has learned to handle his anxiety without medication by using a relaxation technique taught to him by someone. Unfortunately, he doesn't remember that it was Lee Jaul who taught him this technique. At Taeyong's house, Joo-hee visits Young-sin to congratulate her on the release of her new album. Soon after, Yeojin arrives with Seung-cheon to join in the celebration. When Seung-cheon sees Joo-hee there, he quickly says goodbye. Yeojin's closeness to Seung-cheon makes Young-sin curious. However, she admits that she has always seen Seung-cheon as her chauffeur. Joo-hee then scolds Yeojin for belittling Seung-cheon in front of others. She reminds Yeojin that she used to be a good person who never discriminated against friends. Yeojin finally tells Joo-hee that Seung-cheon's family has been living at her house and calls him shameless for doing anything for money. Just then, Seung-cheon and Taeyong arrive and overhear the conversation. Seung-cheon admits that he has been avoiding Joo-hee because he likes her but feels unworthy to be by her side. As he leaves, Joo-hee tries to catch up with him, saying she still likes him no matter what. Meanwhile, Ha-do, while playing golf, accidentally sees Sang-guk and his daughter arguing about company matters. This makes Ha-do consider investing in Sang-guk's company. One day, Joo-hee meets Taeyong, who wants to see Seung-cheon at Yeojin's place. Unfortunately, Seung-cheon is at the lake with Yeojin. From Yeojin's confession, Seung-cheon learns that she is Nara, who used a golden spoon to change her fate. Even though he has lived as Taeyong, Seung-cheon decides he does not want to use the golden spoon again. Suddenly, Yeojin takes Seung-cheon's golden spoon and throws it into the lake. He is shocked and upset by her actions. Meanwhile, while waiting for Yeojin, Taeyong and Joo-hee accidentally find a golden spoon in Yeojin's room. At the lakeside, Yeojin admits that the spoon she threw away was fake and that the real gold spoon is still in her room. Seeing Seung-cheon's reaction to losing the spoon, Yeojin offers him a plan. He can use the golden spoon again to switch lives with Taeyong and then marry her. With the wealth they gain, they could enjoy life together. Seung-cheon feels annoyed by her suggestion, but Yeojin asks him to consider it. In Yeojin's room, Taeyong is curious about the golden spoon since Seung-cheon has one too. Moments later, Taeyong and Joo-hee are hosted by Dong-pil. They are shocked to see Seung-cheon's parents working for Yeojin's family, cooking and cleaning the house without pay because they borrowed money from Yeojin's family to settle their debts. Taeyong reminds Dong-pil not to mistreat Seung-cheon's family. Soon after, Yeojin arrives, and Joo-hee tries to remind her that she should respect Seung-cheon's family, despite her own family's wealth. However, Yeojin responds that she is more worried about her father's company, which is on the brink of bankruptcy. At the Dawson Group office, Sang-guk and Gum-sok meet with Ha-do to discuss the withdrawal of investment in Sang-guk's company. Hyun-do explains that while the Dawson Group has been supportive, Sang-guk's company is struggling due to Gum-sok's poor leadership. He then suggests that Sang-guk hand over his company to prevent it from going bankrupt. Sang-guk feels offended by this suggestion, especially since he had defended Taeyong when he was in trouble in America. This argument leads Hyun-do to decide to call off the engagement between Taeyong and Joo-hee. That night, Joo-hee is at home, worried about her father, who comes home drunk. Sang-guk tells her that the engagement with Taeyong has been canceled and promises to find a better man for her. Meanwhile, Lee Jol and his wife are arguing. Sun-hae is frustrated with her husband for only drinking and not finding solutions to their problems, which allow Yo-jin's family to take advantage of them. Hearing his parents fight, Seung-cheon decides he needs to take action. The next day, after Yo-jin and her father leave, Seung-cheon rushes into Yo-jin's room to search for his golden spoon. Unfortunately, Yo-jin returns just as he is looking, and they get into a fight. She offers to give him the golden spoon again, but only if he agrees to marry her after switching lives with Taeyong. Seung-cheon, wanting to avoid more trouble, leaves Yo-jin's room empty-handed. A few days later, news spreads about Sang-guk's company going bankrupt. Seung-cheon asks Joo-hee to hang out with him to cheer her up. Despite her problems, she feels better as long as Seung-cheon is by her side. Meanwhile, Yo-jin tells her father to kick Seung-cheon's family out of their home. She hopes that this will make Seung-cheon desperate enough to agree to her demands. Dong-pil then informs Seung-cheon's family that they must leave his house within 10 days if they cannot pay off their debt. In front of his children, Lee Jol promises to find a way to repay Dong-pil and secure a new place for them to live. Meanwhile, Sung-hae is searching for loan money to buy shares that she believes will bring quick profits. One day, Taeyong learns that his father has called off his engagement with Joo-hee. Hyun-do explains that the engagement is not financially beneficial for the Dawson Group. Disappointed by his father's focus on money, Taeyong declares that he will still fight for Joo-hee, as she has been a lifesaver for him. Unbeknownst to them, Young-sin and Jun-tae are eavesdropping on the conversation. Young-sin tells Jun-tae that he should quickly enter Hyun-do's company so he can start controlling the wealth of the Dawson Group. As Taeyong walks away, he continues to think about Joo-hee. Suddenly, memories of his time in America flood back, triggering his anxiety. Mun-ki notices Taeyong's struggle and pulls over when he sees Taeyong having difficulty breathing. Meanwhile, Sun-hae is out with Dong-pil, who tries to seduce her. He suggests that her family's debt could be cleared if she agrees to do something she finds unacceptable. Dong-pil has had feelings for Sun-hae for a long time and keeps trying to persuade her. Realizing that the meeting is not what she expected, Sun-hae quickly refuses and leaves him, taking a bus. At the publisher's office, Lee Jol has found a job drawing adult comic stories. He tries to call Sun-hae to share the news, but she doesn't answer. Worried, he decides to visit her workplace. When he arrives, he learns that Sun-hae is not there, so he assumes she is looking for a loan from a friend. On the other hand, Seung-cheon visits Jin-suk's empty house. Suddenly, a homeless woman breaks in, and feeling sorry for her, Seung-cheon gives her some money. He hears the woman mention that she is searching for gold spoons and has been looking for the old lady who sells them for years. Later, Seung-cheon sees Dong-pil trying to seduce his mother outside Yo-jin's house. Furious, he plans to teach Yo-jin's father a lesson. Just then, Yo-jin arrives and stops him, warning that it could lead to more trouble, and Seung-cheon reluctantly agrees to back down. Frustrated, Seung-cheon spends the evening drinking at a tavern. He regrets not taking Taeyong's original watch when they switch places. He thinks that if he had another chance to switch, he wouldn't waste it. While he is drunk, he believes he sees the old woman selling gold spoons in front of him, who tells him that he can use the golden spoon again. Meanwhile, Taeyong searches the internet for information about a traumatic event from his time at school in America. Unable to find anything useful, Mun-ki suggests that Young-sin might still have a copy of the article related to the incident. With Mun-ki's help, Taeyong manages to retrieve the copy without raising Young-sin's suspicions. Once he has it, he finds an article about a student named James. When it's safe, Taeyong asks Mun-ki to help him find a reporter named Lee Chul-sung, who wrote the article. At the convenience store, Seung-cheon is shocked to hear that the stock he invested in has dropped in price. Angry and frustrated, he believes the only way to get money is to trade his life with Taeyong. Soon after, Seung-cheon meets Yeojin, who is hanging out with her friends. He asks her for his golden spoon. Meanwhile, his family has been kicked out of Dongpil's house and is temporarily living separately. With the golden spoon in his possession, Seung-cheon feels torn. He decides to visit the church where Joo-hee used to pray. On the other hand, Joo-hee is upset with Sang-guk for handing over his shares to Jeom-suk to sell to Jun-tae. Joo-hee thinks her father is too focused on money, especially since their family company is on the brink of bankruptcy. Because of their argument, she decides to leave home. After learning that reporter Lee Chul-sung works at Sang-guk's office, Taeyong goes to Sang-guk's house to ask about the events from America. Sang-guk hands Taeyong a hard drive and reveals that James died because Taeyong shot him. This shocking news leaves Taeyong in disbelief. He angrily pushes Sang-guk against the wall before leaving in a daze. Meanwhile, Joo-hee visits the church and unexpectedly runs into Seung-cheon. He expresses his hope that she will still like him, even if he seems different now. When Joo-hee returns home, she finds the house dark and empty of maids. Suddenly, she notices blood on the floor, which makes her panic. The next morning, Taeyong wakes up and tells his father he had a dream about Sang-guk's death. Han-do tells him to forget about their meeting the night before. Confused, Taeyong wonders if Sang-guk's death is somehow connected to him, especially when he sees dried blood on his hands. When Taeyong goes to Joo-hee's house to check on her, he sees police officers everywhere. Overwhelmed with questions, he runs out of the house and almost gets hit by a car. Luckily, Yeojin arrives just in time to save him, trying to help him stay calm. Yeojin is concerned because she knows that Seung-cheon is currently at Taeyong's house using the golden spoon. After entering Taeyong's house, Seung-cheon asks for food and starts using the golden spoon again, resulting in their lives switching once more. Elsewhere, Joo-hee is devastated by her father's death. Soon after, the investigation team arrives, revealing that Han-do's men ordered the removal of evidence, including Taeyong's fingerprints and the CCTV footage. The next day, news about Sang-guk spreads through the media. Mr. Go reports to Han-do that everything has been resolved, and the police have confirmed that Sang-guk's death was an accident. Seung-cheon, now living as Taeyong, approaches Han-do about the news of Sang-guk's death. Han-do advises him to forget about the incident, which makes Seung-cheon suspicious that Sang-guk's death might be connected to Taeyong. Meanwhile, when Seung-cheon meets Young Sin, he learns that Taeyong came home drunk. A maid is seen cleaning up Taeyong's belongings and is instructed to burn his blood-stained clothes. Seung-cheon looks at the golden spoon and realizes that the time left for their fate has changed to 10 years. Han-do warns Mun-ki for failing to protect Taeyong on multiple occasions and tells him not to make the same mistake again. At her father's funeral, Joo-hee feels something is off about his death. However, Gum-sok scolds her for overthinking the situation. Seung-cheon, posing as Taeyong, also attends a funeral, and only Yeojin knows his true identity. Seung-cheon feels jealous of Taeyong again because Joo-hee seems closer to him. After a disagreement about Joo-hee's brother taking control at the funeral, Seung-cheon decides to leave. Soon after, Seung-cheon learns that Jun-tae is buying shares of Sang-guk's company. He quickly orders Mun-ki to find out where Jun-tae got the money. He also asks Mun-ki to investigate Dongpil's business. It doesn't take long for Mun-ki to discover that Dongpil's company has been involved in tax evasion for years. Elsewhere, Sung-hae gets a promotion at her job. Lee Jol receives a call from a famous comic company, and Sun-hae manages to get a loan big enough to buy a house. From a distance, Seung-cheon is determined to return to his family once he earns 100 billion won. When Yeojin learns that the police are investigating her father's company for tax evasion, she realizes that Seung-cheon is behind it. She becomes angry because he refuses to cooperate with her and is still angry at Dongpil, who kicked his family out. Meanwhile, Jun-tae feels satisfied after gaining control of part of Sang-guk's company's shares and informs Han-do of his success. At the same time, Seung-cheon meets a man named Alex Bu, who financed Jun-tae's stock purchases. Seung-cheon asks Alex to choose the more advantageous side. He reminds Alex that Jun-tae is just Han-do's brother-in-law, while he is Hyun-do's son and will become the heir to the Dasan Group. Not long after, Juntae hears that Alex Bu has withdrawn his investment. This shows that Alex is more in favor of Hyun-do's son. Meanwhile, Ju-hee, curious about her father's death, tries to ask the maid who used to work at their house about the last person her father saw. However, the maid doesn't share any information because she has been bribed by Mr. Go, especially with Tae-young's arrival. That night, Hyun-do is unaware that Seung-cheon, now pretending to be Tae-young, has convinced Alex Bu to withdraw his money, which frustrates Juntae. Seung-cheon explains that he did this to reduce public suspicion regarding reports that Hyun-do caused Sang-guk's company to go bankrupt. Seeing Tae-young's strange behavior as he starts discussing the company, Young-sin grows curious about what has happened to him. The next day, Ju-hee asks Hyun-do for help in investigating her father's death. Instead of assistance, Hyun-do offers her a check, which she firmly refuses. On the other hand, an angry Yeojin slaps Seung-cheon for threatening to report her father's company for tax evasion. Seung-cheon stands firm, saying he cannot accept the way Dong-pil treats his family. Unbeknownst to them, Juntae is watching their argument through a CCTV camera and knows that Hyun-do has deleted some recordings. After Sang-guk's death, Gum-sok tells Ju-hee that their father did not leave her any inheritance. Tae-young, who overhears, becomes frustrated because he sees Ji being treated unfairly by her brothers. He offers to help her find a good lawyer to claim her inheritance. Soon after, Ju-hee and Tae-young meet Alex Bu, who impresses them with his ability to tell the difference between real and fake paintings. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon takes Mun-ki to Sung-ae's salon and gives her his phone number, telling her to call if she needs help. Unbeknownst to them, Jang-geun is at the salon spying on Seung-cheon under Yeojin's orders, hoping to find his weaknesses. After consulting his lawyer, Seung-cheon informs Ju-hee that she may need to give up her father's inheritance because Sang-guk is heavily in debt. He also reveals that the house she lives in is going to be auctioned by Gum-sok. One night, Tae-young gets into a fight with Dong-pil, who is flirting with Sun-hae. In a fit of anger, Tae-young takes the wheel of Dong-pil's car and drives off with him. Sung-hae asks Seung-cheon to help stop Tae-young's reckless actions. Eventually, he manages to halt the car that Tae-young is driving. Seung-cheon then warns Dong-pil to forget about the incident or he will expose secrets about his company. Meanwhile, Yeojin tries to evade Tae-young's attack and reports him to the police, hoping to force Seung-cheon to obey her. Juntae continues to gather information, suspecting that Tae-young might be involved in Sang-guk's murder. Later that night, Juntae questions Seung-cheon about Sang-guk's death. Soon after, several people claiming to be police officers arrest him and take him away. It turns out this is part of the welcoming ceremony for Seung-cheon joining the Amicus Club, a group of influential business leaders and conglomerates. There, he sees some of his school friends, including Jang-geun and Yeojin. As Seung-cheon tries to leave, Juntae hands him a drink that has sleeping pills in it. Juntae then asks him about Sang-guk's death, but Seung-cheon insists he did not kill Sang-guk. Unbeknownst to them, Yeojin is eavesdropping on their conversation. Elsewhere, Tae-young gives Ju-hee a stun gun for protection since she lives alone. However, he feels uneasy when he sees a photo of Sang-guk in her room. The next morning, Seung-cheon wakes up from a nightmare in which Tae-young killed his family. He asks Mun-ki what he thinks about Tae-young. Mun-ki reveals that Tae-young can be stubborn and sometimes annoying, but he is also kind and caring. He adds that Tae-young panics whenever he sees blood. The following day, Yeojin visits Hyun-do and informs him about Juntae's treatment of Seung-cheon. She realizes that if Seung-cheon gets into trouble, her plans to improve the Dasan Group's fortune will fail. Yeojin expresses her desire to get engaged to Seung-cheon. Meanwhile, at the convenience store, Seung-cheon deliberately tries to provoke Tae-young to see how much he can control his anger. However, he finds no evidence that Tae-young is capable of killing someone. At home, Hyun-do is furious with Juntae for treating Tae-young like a criminal and beats Juntae with a stick. Young-sin tries to calm her husband down, explaining that Juntae has always followed Hyun-do's orders to help the struggling Tae-young. Soon after, Hyun-do accuses Young-sin of wanting to control the Dasan Group's assets. On the other hand, Ju-hee, having been kicked out of her house, decides to stay in a hotel. Seung-cheon gives her 500 million won and cuts all family ties with her. Elsewhere, Seung-cheon is on a historical tour with the Amicus Club, where he discovers that Juntae has bullied Taeyong since they were teenagers. During the tour, he learns about proper stock trading. Yeojin warns Seung-cheon to be careful, as Juntae is suspicious about Sang-guk's death. She also advises him to ensure that Joo-hee does not hear any rumors about her father's murder. A few days later, Lee Jol sat nervously in the office of a famous webtoon company, waiting for his interview. Sadly, the manager decided he wasn't drawing well enough since the accident he had. At home, Lee Jol felt upset about the tuition fees for Taeyong, his son. Taeyong surprised him by saying he didn't want to go to college and preferred to start working instead. Meanwhile, at Hyeon-do's house, Young-sin encountered Juntae, who had been hurt by her husband. While talking, she spotted Taeyong's jacket online. It was supposed to be burned, but the maid was selling it. Young-sin quickly asked her maid to return the jacket, feeling certain that Hyeon-do was hiding something important. That night, Joo-hee met Seung-cheon at a cafe with Taeyong. Seung-cheon kindly asked her to think of him as a friend and to reach out if she needed help. On her way home, Joo-hee received a call from her old maid. The maid wanted money in exchange for information about Joo-hee's father's death. Days later, during a meeting at the Dawson Group, Hyeon-do seemed to like Seung-cheon's advertising idea. Alex Boo praised him and told Hyeon-do that his son would become a great businessman one day. At a cafe, Eugene accidentally saw Joo-hee handing over money from a suitcase to Taeyong. She realized Joo-hee planned to give it to her former maid, who had information about her father. Worried, Eugene called Seung-cheon to stop Joo-hee from meeting the maid. At a busy intersection, Seung-cheon noticed the maid heading toward Joo-hee. Suddenly, a truck hit the maid and she died on the spot. Seung-cheon recognized that Hyeon-do was behind this, and he hurried away, even though Joo-hee saw him leave. The sight of the blood triggered Taeyong's anxiety, causing Joo-hee to panic and drop her suitcase. Elsewhere, Young-sin was on the phone with Juntae. She discovered that the blood on Taeyong's suit belonged to Sang-guk. Juntae then plotted to use this against Hyeon-do, hoping to force him to give all of Taeyong's assets to him. He also demanded that Hyeon-do send his son to America. Meanwhile, Joo-hee had to leave the hotel after her money was stolen. Taeyong felt that life was unfair to him, especially as he watched his parents struggle to pay for Lee Jol's medical treatment. In his despair, Alex Boo called Taeyong, offering a quick way to make money. At Hyeon-do's house, Juntae was seen beating Seung-cheon with a stick. A flashback revealed that Juntae had shot James in the past, but had blamed Taeyong, who was in America at the time. Taeyong, innocent and scared, was forced to confess that he shot James because Juntae threatened to kill him. In the present, Yeojin attends a pajama party and runs into Joo-hee. Joo-hee mistakenly thinks that the suitcase Yeojin is carrying belongs to her. After Yeojin proves that she is not at fault, she remarks that her father's company going bankrupt is karma because in the past, when she was still known as Nara, she felt hurt by Joo-hee. In reality, Yeojin had taken Joo-hee's chosen suitcase. Instead of returning it, she gives it to a homeless woman on the street. Meanwhile, Hyeon-do has secured Taeyong's jacket, which is stained with Sang-guk's blood. He decides to send Seung-cheon to America, not wanting his son to get into more trouble. Before Seung-cheon leaves for America, he texts Joo-hee and visits his family to check on them. Seeing his parents and older sister happy with Taeyong makes him rush to the airport. Shortly after, Joo-hee arrives to say goodbye. But when she meets Seung-cheon, who is now Taeyong, she suddenly remembers that her former maid recognized Taeyong just before she was hit by a truck while crossing the street. Joo-hee quickly assumes that Taeyong is the person her maid saw the night her father died, and she accuses him of being responsible for her father's death. Upset, she demands that Taeyong confess to killing her father. Before she can cause a scene at the airport, the Hwang family's guards stop her and escort her away. Seeing Joo-hee's anger and pain makes Seung-cheon even sadder, as the girl he loves now hates him. 10 years later, Taeyong, still living as Seung-cheon, goes for a job interview at a company. Although he meets all the qualifications, the company looks down on him because he comes from a poor background. After the interview, as he leaves, he notices an advertisement for Yeojin's beauty product business, which has made her very successful. At Yeojin's office, Jang-geun, who now runs an entertainment business, tries to convince her to be a guest on his variety show. Just then, Joo-hee, who works in the investigative division of a TV station, calls Jang-geun. She warns him and Yeojin about her team's plan to investigate gambling activities related to Amicus. The Amicus Party, hosted by wealthy business people, is buzzing with excitement. Joo-hee and Taeyong, working undercover, pose as waiters at the party to gather evidence of the gambling happening among the guests. Not long after, Juntae and his friend arrived at the lively Amicus party. Seung-cheon, now a rebellious young man, was seen enjoying the party, drinking and dancing with several women. At the same time, Yeojin entered the party with Jang-geun and quickly spotted Seung-cheon, who was now her fiancé. Meanwhile, Joo-hee was busy recording the gambling activities happening in a room at the party. Unfortunately, one of her team members got caught by security. Joo-hee knew she had to escape. Just then, Seung-cheon found Joo-hee and took her to a safer spot. She was surprised by how much he had changed since she thought he was in America. He asked her if she had been looking for him because she still suspected him of killing her father. Seung-cheon quickly assured her that he didn't do it because there was nothing to gain from such an act. Moments later, Taeyong appeared at the venue and told Seung-cheon, who was hugging Joo-hee, to stay away from her. Meanwhile, party security, alerted by Yeojin about Joo-hee and Taeyong being part of the investigation team, dragged them out of the party. At that moment, Seung-cheon unexpectedly ran into Juntae, who still treated him roughly. However, Seung-cheon seemed unfazed by Juntae's rude behavior and appeared indifferent. After Juntae left, Yeojin, frustrated with Seung-cheon, decided to leave. Seung-cheon rushed to catch up with her. Once they were in the car, Yeojin asked why he hadn't stood up for himself when Juntae insulted him. He replied casually to keep her calm. Irritated by his response, Yeojin suddenly stopped the car. Soon after, Hyun-do's men arrived and arrested Seung-cheon, taking him to see Hyun-do. When Seung-cheon arrived at Hyun-do's house, a female butler and young Sin were surprised by how much he had changed. In Hyun-do's room, after asking why Seung-cheon returned to Korea, Seung-cheon explained that he felt bored and lonely in America. Hyun-do was also curious about Seung-cheon's wish to become the heir of the Dasan Group. Seung-cheon casually replied that he didn't have much else to do since he no longer owned shares in Dasan and wasn't getting any help from his father in America. Meanwhile, at Joo-hee's home, she opened a box filled with files about her father's murder. She had kept these documents for 10 years, still searching for the truth behind his death. Joo-hee suspected that several people related to the Dasan Group were involved in her father's case. On the other side, Taeyong received a call from Seung-cheon, who had been drinking heavily and sleeping on the streets. Realizing how badly Seung-cheon's life had turned out, Young Sin told Juntae not to worry about him, threatening Juntae's position as the heir to the Dasan Group. One day, Seung-cheon boldly got drunk in public and took a girl to a hotel, attracting the attention of reporters who rushed to cover the story. When he noticed the reporters following him, Seung-cheon kissed the girl on purpose. Once inside the hotel room, he found several people waiting for him, and they applauded his actions. However, he was only pretending to be drunk, and the woman with him was actually Mun-ki, his personal assistant, used to draw attention from the media. Soon after, Seung-cheon held a meeting with his team. He explained that he had deliberately made his life seem ruined so that Juntae wouldn't see him as a rival. He revealed that he had survived assassination attempts in America, leaving scars on his body. These events led him to get engaged to Yeojin because she had saved him, and he even gave her his golden spoon, a symbol of his wealth. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon's real family life was improving. Lee Jal had opened a souvenir shop with help from An Moon. The next day, news broke about the son of the owner of the Dasan Group using illegal drugs, causing the company's stock to drop sharply. This was part of Seung-cheon's plan to buy most of the shares in the Dasan Group. At Seung-cheon's family home, Taeyong was cleaning old books when he stumbled upon a note from Seung-cheon about a golden spoon. At a board meeting for the Dasan Group, many members urged Juntae to resign as CEO, criticizing his performance for allowing the scandal to damage the company. Juntae refused to accept their decision, feeling it was unfair. Moments later, Seung-cheon entered the room, bringing evidence that Juntae had committed crimes against the company. Juntae quickly denied the accusations, insisting that Seung-cheon had no right to speak since he didn't own any shares. Hyun-do stepped in, explaining that Seung-cheon, now known as Tae-yong, had become the largest shareholder in the Dawson Group. Juntae was shocked and furious, and he left the meeting to contact Juhee, telling her that Tae-yong was the one who had killed her father 10 years ago. After the call, Juhee rushed out of her office to find Seung-cheon and asked for an exclusive interview about his life as the son of the Dawson Group. However, he refused her request, and as he tried to leave, Juhee attempted to stop him. Just then, Yeojin arrived and warned Juhee not to disturb her fiancé. Determined to get the interview, Juhee later approached Young-sin, asking for her help in convincing Seung-cheon to agree. After speaking with Young-sin, Juhee returned to Hyun-do's residence and entered Seung-cheon's room, hoping to find a clue. She spotted a locked safe and wondered what secrets it might hold. At night, Yeojin and her father had dinner at Hyun-do's house to talk about her relationship. During dinner, Young-sin explained why their family believed Seung-cheon, now called Tae-yong, should marry Yeojin. She pointed out that Yeojin was the daughter of a businessman with much less money than the Dawson Group. Dong-pil, Yeojin's father, was left speechless, and Yeojin felt hurt when Young-sin mentioned her ordinary looks. In that moment, Seung-cheon stood up for Yeojin. He told Young-sin that Yeojin had helped him survive while he was in America. After dinner, Yeojin hugged Seung-cheon, thanking him for defending her. However, Seung-cheon quickly pulled away from the hug. He said he only did it because he saw Yeojin as a co-worker who could benefit him in the future. Yeojin, who had fallen in love with him, felt silent and watched as he left. In her room, Yeojin was still upset with Seung-cheon for seeing her as just a business partner. While looking at his golden spoon, she muttered to herself that he didn't understand an important rule. The owner of the golden spoon must protect it from being used by others. Anyone who uses someone else's golden spoon will carry memories of the owner. The next morning, Seung-cheon unexpectedly showed up at Juhee's office at the TV station. He was there to do the interview he had previously declined. As Tae-yong, the young CEO of the Dawson Group, Seung-cheon received a warm welcome from the employees at the station. One of the managers asked the real Tae-yong, who worked part-time there, to go get coffee. However, Tae-yong took too long to return. When he finally came back, Seung-cheon had already finished discussing the interview details and seemed ready to leave the office. The manager scolded Tae-yong for being gone so long. Seeing this, Seung-cheon realized that if he hadn't changed his life, he would be in Tae-yong's position. When Seung-cheon got home, he ran into Juntae, who reminded him to reflect on the consequences of killing. Juntae then revealed that he was the real killer, mentioning the shirt he wore when he had killed a student in America. This annoyed Juntae, and he wondered how Seung-cheon could remember that incident. Feeling frustrated, Juntae decided to calm down at a bar. Later, Young-sin arrived to pick up the drunk Juntae. She urged him to fight again for the CEO position of the Dawson Group. However, Juntae told Young-sin to kill Seung-cheon, also known as Tae-yong, so he wouldn't be a threat to him. At the Dawson Group office, Hyun-do and some employees were discussing the latest developments in the company when suddenly, an angry Young-sin burst into the room, interrupting the meeting. After the employees left, Hyun-do calmly asked Young-sin why she was there. Young-sin, who owned some shares in the Dawson Group, warned him that she would cause problems if he gave Seung-cheon a high position in the company. Hearing his wife's threat, Hyun-do replied that he knew Juntae was her son, not his younger brother as she had always claimed. Feeling cornered by his words, Young-sin chose to stay silent. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon and his assistant Mun-ki were looking into Juntae's possible involvement in the murder of Sang-guk, Juhee's father. Seung-cheon discovered some evidence related to the case. When he opened the safe in Juhee's room, he was able to see the password thanks to a hidden camera he had set up when Juhee had entered his room earlier. The next day, Hyun-do was in his office when he asked his male secretary to call Seung-cheon. The secretary informed him that Seung-cheon was not in his office because he was at an important meeting, which piqued Hyun-do's curiosity. As it turned out, Seung-cheon was at a restaurant meeting Tae-yong, who was applying for a job at the Dawson Group. Soon after, Mun-ki arrived at the restaurant with Seung-cheon's family, who had come after receiving an invitation from him. However, Hyun-do's curiosity about Seung-cheon's meeting led him to the same restaurant, where he joined Seung-cheon's family. While they were eating, Hyun-do noticed that Seung-cheon, whom he knew as Tae-yong, had the same eating habits as Lee Jal. This surprised him and stirred feelings of jealousy. Later at home, Seung-cheon confronted Hyun-do about his father's earlier visit for a family meal. Hyun-do explained that he wanted to understand why Seung-cheon had left his job to spend time with another family. Hyun-do then shared his belief that empathy could be a major obstacle for those wanting to succeed because it might lessen the desire to compete. Seung-cheon felt sad hearing this and admitted that he envied Lee Jal's family, who always trusted their children. With that, he left Hyun-do. A few days later, the TV station crew arrived at the Hyun-do residence for an exclusive interview with Seung-cheon. As the interview began, Joo-hee quietly snuck into Seung-cheon's room and opened his safe using the password. Unfortunately, she found no evidence about her father's murder. Instead, she discovered a book filled with drawings of Mr. Smile and another book that she had once given to Seung-cheon, who had not yet changed places with Tae-yong. Unbeknownst to Joo-hee, Seung-cheon entered the room and asked why she was opening his safe. Joo-hee then asked him about the book she had given him. Seung-cheon calmly replied that he had taken the book because he loved Joo-hee when he was in high school. Seung-cheon warned Joo-hee not to do anything reckless by entering other people's rooms without permission. However, Joo-hee insisted that she would do whatever it takes to uncover the truth about her father's death, believing that Seung-cheon, now known as Tae-yong, was involved in the murder. Shortly after, Seung-cheon received a message from Yo-jin, showing that she was eating with Tae-yong and using his gold spoon. Panic surged through him, and he rushed to meet her, asking Joo-hee to leave his room. When Seung-cheon confronted Yo-jin, he looked angry and demanded to know why she was doing this. She explained that it was a warning for him not to go near Joo-hee, or she would make Tae-yong use his golden spoon, which might bring back his memories. Meanwhile, in her room, Joo-hee remembered a book with Mr. Smile in Seung-cheon's safe. It reminded her of her childhood nickname, Mr. Smile. Elsewhere, Seung-cheon's parents were at Hyun-do's residence delivering food. Before leaving, Lee Jal accidentally spotted a set of comic drawing tools he had long wanted. He asked Young-sin if he could take a look at them. Unbeknownst to him, Hyun-do had placed the drawing equipment there on purpose to get Lee Jal's attention. Meanwhile, in his office, Hyun-do invited Tae-yong, known as Seung-cheon, to offer him a high-paying job at the Dawson Group. However, Tae-yong hesitated and asked for some time to think about the offer. Later, Joo-hee met Jun-tae at a cafe, hoping to convince him to be an informant. She mentioned that the TV station where she worked planned to rebroadcast her father's murder. To provoke Jun-tae, she took off her blazer, revealing a t-shirt with a picture of Mr. Smile, while calling him Mr. Smile. Hearing this nickname made Jun-tae angry. He pulled Joo-hee's hair and threatened her. Luckily, Seung-cheon arrived just in time to save her, warning Jun-tae that he would kill him if he hurt Joo-hee. Angry, Jun-tae punched Seung-cheon, and a fight broke out between them. When Seung-cheon found himself cornered, Joo-hee quickly used her electric shock device to help him escape. Once they were far away from the cafe, Seung-cheon told her to stay away from Jun-tae, who was not afraid to hurt anyone. After the cafe incident, Seung-cheon invited Tae-yong and Joo-hee to work together to expose Jun-tae as the killer of Sang-guk. At Joo-hee's house, Seung-cheon shared some evidence he had found about the murder, explaining how Jun-tae had blamed Tae-yong for it before Seung-cheon could change his fate. Seung-cheon then planned to find the person Jun-tae had ordered to kill Sang-guk. Meanwhile, Tae-yong and Joo-hee's task was to check the CCTV footage from the time of Sang-guk's murder. To begin his plan, Seung-cheon and his assistant Mun-ki went to a nightclub to meet one of Jun-tae's close friends. At the same time, Jun-tae sneaked into Joo-hee's house and discovered evidence that could connect him to Sang-guk's murder. Worried that Joo-hee might expose him, he decided to kill her. Jun-tae waited around Joo-hee's house until she came home. He picked up a rock, ready to attack her. Just as he was about to strike, Joo-hee received a call from Seung-cheon, who told her he was coming to her house. Not long after, Seung-cheon arrived at Joo-hee's house and shared the information he had obtained from Jun-tae's confidant. After a long and busy day, Seung-cheon felt tired and sleepy, and he eventually fell asleep on Joo-hee's shoulder. The next morning, Seung-cheon woke up before Joo-hee and quietly started preparing breakfast. When Taeyong came over that morning, he felt a twinge of jealousy upon seeing Seung-cheon there. While they were having breakfast together, Taeyong, still curious about the golden spoon, suddenly asked Seung-cheon about it. This made Seung-cheon panic, and he decided to leave quickly. Taeyong noticed his strange behavior, which only deepened his suspicion about the golden spoon. Meanwhile, Hyun-do received a report revealing that the real killer of Sang-guk was Juntae, not Taeyong. With this information, he headed to Juntae's place carrying a brown folder. At a restaurant, Joo-hee was having lunch with her female colleague when she spotted a homeless woman carrying a suitcase that looked just like the one she lost 10 years ago. Joo-hee decided to approach the woman, but she soon lost track of her and couldn't follow. Sometime later, Juntae turned himself into the police for the murder of Sang-guk. This shocking news spread quickly through various media outlets, leaving Seung-cheon surprised and confused about why Juntae would voluntarily confess. Meanwhile, Taeyong was walking and reflecting on his life when he noticed a crystal ball rolling toward him. He picked it up and returned it to an old lady who was selling antiques. She offered him a gold spoon similar to the one Seung-cheon had. Curious about the spoon, Taeyong decided to buy it. After checking how the golden spoon worked in Seung-cheon's notebook, he realized he was the real Taeyong. With this knowledge, when he delivered food to Hyun-do's residence, he used the gold spoon to eat the food given to him. Later, Taeyong met Joo-hee and asked her to chat during a break. He felt that he could change his fate again and wanted revenge on Seung-cheon. He told Joo not to give him any gifts for his birthday and asked her not to respond to his declaration of love. He claimed that just being her close friend made him happy enough. Meanwhile, Hyun-do was busy winning the hearts of many important people in Korea to help launch his business and build the Dasun Group. With his cleverness, he gave out various irresistible gifts, making it easy for him to ask for help when he needed it. However, he faced his first failure when he tried to impress Lee Jol, who loved comics. Lee Jol turned down Hyun-do's gift. At Seung-cheon's family home, everyone was having dinner together. However, Taeyong, now aware of his true identity, appeared angry, which made Sun-hae, Seung-cheon's mother, feel very sad. When he went to his room, he saw his golden spoon and felt determined to reclaim his position as the only son of the Dasun Group, which Seung-cheon had taken from him. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon knew that Taeyong had visited his residence and used a gold spoon to eat. He instructed the female butler not to let anyone come and eat at his house anymore. On the other hand, Young-sin was feeling down after Juntae's imprisonment, and she began to hold a grudge against Seung-cheon. A few moments later, the female butler visited Young-sin and reported Seung-cheon's earlier requests. After hearing the report, Young-sin decided to invite Taeyong to her house and prepared food for him. She then asked why Seung-cheon had forbidden Taeyong from eating at their home. Taeyong, listening to Young-sin's question, became more convinced of his suspicions that Seung-cheon had traded his fortunes. He then ate the food using the magic gold spoon. Unbeknownst to them, Hyun-do had seen Taeyong eating at the house and called Seung-cheon to inform him. Seung-cheon grew even more anxious upon hearing this news and decided to visit his poor family's home. When he arrived, he only found his mother there. After Taeyong returned, Seung-cheon explained that he had come to invite Taeyong for a meal, as Taeyong had asked several times to eat at his house. The next day, Joo-hee was at the office when she received a call from her senior. Her senior had found Joo-hee's lost luggage at the restaurant they often visited, so Joo-hee rushed over. When she arrived and opened the suitcase, she found that her money was missing. She quickly asked a nearby homeless woman about her money. The homeless woman replied that Joo-hee had very little money and it wouldn't be enough to meet her needs as GM Seung-cheon, a member of the Gangnam District Council. Joo-hee and her senior exchanged worried glances, thinking the woman might be mentally unstable. However, the woman explained that GM Seung-cheon was currently her servant, and she was searching for the golden spoon to change her fate. She then asked Seung-cheon to confirm if the spoon she was looking for was indeed a golden spoon that could make someone rich. It was as if Seung-cheon understood her, and she asked Joo-hee where the old woman selling antiques was. Meanwhile, at Seung-cheon's luxurious residence, Taeyong arrived to fulfill Seung-cheon's earlier invitation. When Seung-cheon saw Taeyong take out his gold spoon, he appeared calm, as if he had a plan in mind. Shortly after, Seung-cheon and Taeyong got into an argument. Seung-cheon asked Tae-yong if he was willing to leave his family behind to become rich. In response, Tae-yong accused Seung-cheon of being the one ready to trade his family for wealth. Seung-cheon then urged Tae-yong to eat the food he had prepared, eager to see his reaction when he learned that the golden spoon had been replaced with a fake one during Seung-cheon's visit to his poor family. Suddenly, Tae-yong refused to eat the food and started to walk away. Seung-cheon, surprised and angry, chased after him and insisted that he eat the meal. But Tae-yong stood firm, saying he would never exchange a loving family for riches. He declared that he was ready to be Seung-cheon forever. After their heated exchange, Tae-yong left, leaving Seung-cheon feeling angry with himself. In an attempt to forget about the argument, Seung-cheon decided to go to a bar and drink. When Yeojin arrived to see him, he opened up about everything that had happened. He felt defeated by Tae-yong, who had chosen family over wealth. Yeojin reminded Seung-cheon that it wasn't wrong for people like them to seek wealth, especially after their difficult past. Feeling understood, Seung-cheon, who was starting to get drunk, agreed to go with her to a hotel. In the hotel room, they did something unexpected, but when Seung-cheon remembered Joo-hee, he suddenly rushed out, leaving Yeojin behind. Meanwhile, Joo-hee was walking home, thinking about the golden spoon the homeless woman had mentioned and the strange behavior of Tae-yong. She started to believe that the Tae-yong she knew was actually Seung-cheon. When Joo-hee arrived at her house, she saw Seung-cheon waiting for her outside. He hugged her tightly, saying he missed her. When Joo-hee asked if it was really him, he immediately pulled away and left. Time passed, and the servants at the Hyundai residence were busy preparing for Seung-cheon's birthday, now celebrated as Tae-yong. Amidst the chaos, Seung-cheon spotted Tae-yong arriving to deliver the ordered food. He felt surprised because he remembered the rule that they shouldn't meet each other's parents on birthdays. Before Seung-cheon could stop this from happening, Hyundai walked in and saw both him and Tae-yong together. However, nothing seemed to go wrong because Hyundai kept calling him Tae-yong, thinking the rule didn't apply in this case. Later, while Seung-cheon was distracted, his parents arrived, and in a twist of fate, Lee Jol called Seung-cheon by his real name. Realizing that their fates had changed again, Seung-cheon quickly swapped his cell phone with Tae-yong's and sent him a message to agree to Hyundai's plan, which involved splitting the company's shares so that Tae-yong wouldn't get into trouble. After finishing the food delivery, Seung-cheon, now with his father, said goodbye and left, hoping to find the old woman who sold golden spoons. Unfortunately, he could not locate her. Confused, he then ran into his mother. Meanwhile, Joo-hee was walking towards Seung-cheon's family home when she was suddenly greeted by Lee Jol, who had just made a delivery. They walked together to his house. When they arrived at the front of the house, Joo-hee noticed Lee Jol entering several passwords, which were the same as the password for Seung-cheon's safe. Realizing this, she asked about the combination, which was Seung-cheon and Seung-ae's birthdays reversed. Suspecting that something was wrong, she quickly said goodbye to Lee Jol and headed to the Dawson Group company. In another room, Yeojin was waiting for Seung-cheon, unaware that he and Tae-yong had switched places again. When Tae-yong finally arrived, Yeojin slapped him, upset that he had left her alone at the hotel the night before. He looked surprised and confused, not understanding her words. Suddenly, he began to experience flashes of Seung-cheon's memories. Seeing his strange behavior, Yeojin realized that Seung-cheon had switched places with Tae-yong once more. At Seung-cheon's house, he was enjoying dinner with his family when suddenly his phone rang. He stepped away from the dining table to answer the call. It was Yeojin, and she congratulated him on returning to his real family. Seung-cheon was surprised and asked her how she knew this. Yeojin explained casually that she had met Tae-yong and guessed that either he or Tae-yong had met each other's parents on their birthdays. Seung-cheon then told her about the golden spoon rule that didn't apply when Tae-yong met Hyundai earlier. Yeojin speculated that Tae-yong might not be Hyundai's biological child. Seung-cheon then asked Yeojin to switch places with Tae-yong again. However, still annoyed, Yeojin simply replied that it was a fitting punishment for him for leaving her alone at the hotel, and then she hung up. After the call, Yeojin was startled to see Joo-hee and worried that she might have overheard her conversation with Seung-cheon. She quickly asked why Joo-hee was there. Joo-hee smiled and said she wanted to wish Tae-yong a happy birthday. Meanwhile, in prison, Jun-tae was visited by Young-sin. He explained how he had finally turned himself in as a suspect in Sang-guk's murder. Jun-tae revealed that on the night Sang-guk was killed, he did not meet him. However, Han-do had threatened to reveal that Jun-tae had killed students in America if he didn't admit to killing Sang-guk. Feeling cornered, Jun-tae agreed to Han-do's wishes, believing that Han-do would help him get out of prison soon. On the other hand, as Seung-cheon walked along the pavement, thinking about returning to being Tae-yong, he was suddenly surprised when Joo-hee drove by and invited him to the beach. Meanwhile, Yo-jin began to investigate the truth about Tae-yong's biological father. She met with Young-sin to ask about Tae-yong's birth mother. Young-sin explained that Tae-yong's biological mother was unstable because she had an affair with Han-do's best friend and constantly asked for a divorce. After receiving the information, Yo-jin quickly tried to call Seung-cheon. However, he kept rejecting her calls because he was at the beach and didn't really enjoy spending time with Joo-hee. Moments later, Yo-jin decided to ask him some questions about their shared experiences to figure out what was going on with him. Seung-cheon answered her questions affirmatively, even when his answers were incorrect. This made Joo-hee realize that he had switched places with Tae-yong again, as she had overheard part of Yo-jin's previous phone conversation. Even though she discovered the truth, she tried to hide it and continued having fun with Seung-cheon. After some time, Joo-hee finally confronted Seung-cheon, saying she knew he had exchanged fortunes with Tae-yong. Seung-cheon was surprised and upset to hear her confession. He asked her not to bring it up again, leaving her alone on the beach. As the sun began to set, Joo-hee sat on the beach deep in thought. Suddenly, Seung-cheon approached her again and admitted that he had left both his family and her to become rich. Hearing this, Joo-hee hugged him tightly, expressing how much she missed the real Seung-cheon. That night, Yo-jin was still thinking about Seung-cheon, who had returned to his original life. Although she had seen him as just a business partner before, she now realized she had fallen in love with him. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon continued to spend time with Joo-hee in the car after coming back from the beach. Unbeknownst to them, Yo-jin was nearby and saw them having fun, which made her feel jealous. Annoyed with Seung-cheon, Yo-jin decided to meet Lee Jol and invited him to dinner, saying she had something important to discuss. On the other side, Tae-yong had returned to his luxurious life and was enjoying a glass of red wine. Suddenly, he accidentally knocked the wine bottle over, spilling it on the floor. This reminded him of the flash of Sang-guk's death, causing him to panic. He quickly ran out of the room to find Mun-ki. Elsewhere, Han-do was seen at an art museum owned by Alex Bu. Meanwhile, when Joo-hee noticed something about the golden spoon, she immediately called Seung-cheon and asked him to meet her near the place where the old lady selling antiques usually was. On the other hand, Tae-yong was having a panic attack after seeing the spilled pool of red wine. The sight triggered memories of how Joo-hee's father had died. He felt anger towards Sang-guk, especially after discussing what had happened in America, but he decided to leave Sang-guk's house. After leaving, Tae-yong changed his mind and returned, driven by curiosity about the complete story of what happened to him in America. When he arrived back at the house, he found Sang-guk lying in a pool of blood. This sight made his anxiety return, and he felt dizzy and semi-conscious. In that moment, he caught a brief glimpse of Han-do's face before he finally collapsed. After a long wait, Seung-cheon finally came to see Joo-hee. Knowing he had 3 chances to choose his parents, Joo-hee pleaded with him not to choose to be Tae-yong. Unfortunately, Seung-cheon could not grant her request because he had switched places with Tae-yong again after the clock struck midnight. Inside the museum, Han-do walked towards a display of golden spoons. This revealed that he was also a gold spoon user, someone who could change his life. 20 years ago, he had been Kwon Yohan, who was his best friend. Yohan did not come from a wealthy family like Han-do, and he felt jealous of his friend's life as the heir to the Dasan group. His jealousy grew when Han-do married Tae-yong's biological mother, creating a happy family with a son named Tae-yong. One day, Yohan met an old woman selling antiques who offered him a gold spoon. He bought it and used it, eventually achieving his dream of becoming Han-do. Meanwhile, Joo-hee felt confused. She had been sure that the person in front of her was Seung-cheon, but now he seemed to be Tae-yong. Seung-cheon then assured Joo-hee that the Tae-yong in front of her was indeed Seung-cheon. Having switched places again, he hurried back to Hyeon-do's residence to find Taeyong, who looked confused about why he was suddenly in someone else's house. Seung-cheon explained that they had switched places again and told Taeyong that Hyeon-do was not his real father. Unfortunately, their conversation was interrupted when Hyeon-do arrived. At Seung-cheon's house, Lee Jol was deep in thought after meeting Yo-jin at the restaurant. During their meeting, Lee Jol received a gold spoon that belonged to Seung-cheon. Yo-jin encouraged him to eat the food served with the spoon if he wanted to know what Seung-cheon had been doing lately. Curious, Lee Jol decided to use the spoon to eat. Suddenly, he was flooded with memories of Seung-cheon changing his fate with Taeyong. This realization made him very sad and disappointed in his son, who was willing to leave his family for the sake of wealth. The next day, Seung-cheon was in the office lobby when he spotted his father waiting for him. Lee Jol looked excited to invite him to lunch, which made Seung-cheon very happy. Unfortunately, just as he was about to accept, Hyeon-do arrived and asked him to come along with him instead. On their way to the meeting, Seung-cheon wondered about his father's unexpected visit to the office. Hyeon-do noticed that Seung-cheon seemed lost in thought and reprimanded him. He explained that he would be meeting all his colleagues and wanted to introduce Seung-cheon as his successor in the company. Hearing this made Seung-cheon very happy, as it meant his goal of becoming the heir to the Dawson Group was close to being achieved. Meanwhile, Joo-hee was with Taeyong, giving him a birthday present. When he opened the gift, Joo-hee accidentally called him by his real name. This surprised him, as it revealed that she knew everything about his fortune swap with Seung-cheon. After his meeting with Hyeon-do, Seung-cheon went to see Yo-jin to call off their engagement. He realized he could not love her, no matter how hard he tried. Yo-jin was not ready to accept this decision and threatened to give his golden spoon to Lee Jol. Seung-cheon replied that he believed Yo-jin wouldn't do that because he thought she had a good heart. After he left, Yo-jin realized she had made a big mistake by giving the golden spoon to Lee Jol. Worried, she hurried to find him and asked for Seung-cheon's golden spoon back. Back at Joo-hee's place, she was having lunch with Seok-ja. She showed Seok-ja a photo of Yo-jin, trying to find out if she was the person who had given a suitcase filled with money to Seok-ja years ago. When Seok-ja saw the photo, she confirmed that it was indeed Yo-jin. While they ate, Seok-ja revealed that she was GM Seok-ja, the real counselor of Gangnam, and that the current Seok-ja was just her servant. Seok-ja explained that she loved the husband of her maid, who was her first love. To be with him, she had agreed to swap her fate with her maid's. However, the man sold her golden spoon, and since then, she had been unable to change her fate again. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon, knowing that Taeyong is not Hyeon-do's biological child, asked his assistant Monkey to investigate Hyeon-do's background. On the other side, Seung-cheon's family was spending time together in a park. Lee Jol, now aware of the truth, was trying to accept that the Seung-cheon with him was actually Taeyong. He was determined to love Taeyong as if he were his own son, trying to forget the real Seung-cheon. Later that night, when Seung-cheon's family returned home, they found him waiting in front of their house. Seeing his son there, Lee Jol felt disappointed and quickly told him to leave. Seung-cheon was shocked by his father's harsh treatment but felt powerless to argue, so he chose to walk away. Even though Seung-cheon had decided to end his engagement, Yo-jin was still determined to be with him. She warned Joo-hee to stay away from Taeyong. However, Joo-hee refused Yo-jin's request, knowing all the truths about Seung-cheon and even Yo-jin's past as Nara. Instead of arguing, Joo-hee calmly acknowledged everything she knew. The next day, Taeyong was hanging out with his friends, chatting about the latest gossip in the Dawson Group. They mentioned Johan, Hyeon-do's best friend, who had suddenly disappeared. This made Taeyong suspicious that Johan might be connected to his biological father. Meanwhile, in prison, Juntae was fighting with Weenum, Yo-jin's father. The fight left Juntae seriously injured, and he had to be rushed to the hospital for treatment. Back at home, Seung-cheon received a call from Lee Jol, who invited him to dinner. Excited to see his father, Seung-cheon immediately agreed. At the same time, Lee Jol was buying a new suit for Taeyong, even though he knew Taeyong was not his real son. On the way home, Lee Jol hugged Taeyong, thanking him for choosing to live with a less wealthy family. He promised to try to be a good father to Taeyong. Not long after, Taeyong said goodbye to Lee Jol and headed to a branch of the Dawson group to ask about Johan. Meanwhile, Young Sin was at the hospital, keeping Juntae company. She called Hyun-do to share her happiness about delaying Juntae's sentencing because of his health condition. However, Hyun-do was not pleased with the news. He believed Young Sin had made a serious mistake by helping a murderer. Hyun-do explained all the crimes Juntae had committed, including those in America. Concerned, Young Sin rushed to Juntae's hospital room, only to find that he had escaped. After running away from the hospital, Juntae called Hyun-do, asking to meet. But Hyun-do refused, which frustrated Juntae. He felt he had done everything Hyun-do asked in exchange for being released from prison and becoming the heir to the Dawson group. Hyun-do explained that he had intended to help Juntae, but since Juntae couldn't wait patiently in prison for a month, he decided to give the Dawson group to Seung-cheon, who had endured 10 years of hardship in America. Realizing he couldn't convince Hyun-do, Juntae began plotting to kill Seung-cheon and secretly followed him. Soon after, Seung-cheon finally met his father for dinner at a restaurant. Lee Jol apologized for how he had treated him earlier. While they were chatting, Seung-cheon received a call from Juntae. He felt a wave of panic and quickly asked if he could take the call in the alley behind the restaurant. Once in the narrow alley, Seung-cheon found Juntae waiting for him. Without warning, Juntae attacked him with a drink bottle. Angry, Juntae pulled out a knife and tried to stab Seung-cheon. Just then, Lee Jol rushed in to stop him, but ended up getting stabbed instead. As Lee Jol fell to the ground, covered in blood, Juntae fled the scene. With Lee Jol starting to lose consciousness, he called Seung-cheon by his real name. This made Seung-cheon feel even sadder, realizing that his father had known the truth about him all along. Afterward, Lee Jol was taken to the hospital, but he couldn't be saved because he had lost too much blood. His family gathered in tears when the doctor delivered the heartbreaking news. Taeyong asked Seung-cheon who had stabbed Lee Jol. Still devastated, Seung-cheon didn't answer. Instead, he left immediately to find Juntae. The news of Lee Jol's death reached Hyun-do, who instructed his assistant to arrest Juntae before the police could find him. Meanwhile, at Hyun-do's residence, Young Sin was hosting a party. She played the piano in front of the guests, but her playing showed her anxiety. Before the party started, she had met Juntae, who came home with blood on his hands. Surprisingly, she didn't ask him what he had done. Instead, she helped him clean the blood and told him to stay hidden until the party was over. Later, Seung-cheon returned to Hyun-do's house, looking for Juntae. Unfortunately, Juntae was hiding behind a curtain, so Seung-cheon couldn't find him. After Seung-cheon left, Juntae snuck into Hyun-do's study, planning to kill him. However, Seung-cheon was already waiting for him and immediately attacked. Juntae, skilled in martial arts, quickly cornered Seung-cheon. Luckily, Hyun-do entered the room just in time and aimed a gun at Juntae. Seung-cheon tried to call the police to arrest Juntae, but Hyun-do stopped him, ordering his men to take Seung-cheon out of the room. In the room, Hyun-do had no plans to turn Juntae over to the police. He knew that doing so would make the Dawson Group's stock drop sharply because of all the media attention. Hyun-do felt grateful that Juntae had killed Lee Jol, who was an obstacle to his goals. He promised to help Juntae avoid the murder charge. However, Juntae didn't trust Hyun-do and pointed his gun at him. Calmly, Hyun-do urged Juntae to put the gun down. His calmness seemed to discourage Juntae, who was feeling uncertain. Hyun-do then revealed a shocking truth. Young Sin was Juntae's real mother, not his older sister. Surprised and disappointed by this revelation, Juntae walked out of the room to find Young Sin. The guests, who had been unaware of his presence, were confused about why Juntae, who was supposed to be in prison, was at home. Juntae pointed his gun at Young Sin, asking her if she really was his mother. The guests, seeing this, became frightened and rushed out of the room. Young Sin, terrified, finally admitted the truth, which made Juntae feel betrayed. In his anger and pain, he decided that he wanted to end his own life. The next day, Lee Jol's funeral took place. An Moon came to pay his respects to the late Lee Jol. Shortly after, Seung-cheon arrived with Joo-hee. At first, Seung-cheon's sister blamed him for their father's death, but eventually, Sun-hae allowed him to pay his respects. Standing before his father's casket, Seung-cheon expressed his sorrow and regretted all his mistakes. His greed for wealth had cost his father's life. That night, Seung-cheon planned to return Tae-yong's golden spoon. He called Tae-yong to meet him by the lake. The next day, they met, and Seung-cheon handed the spoon to Tae-yong, apologizing for ruining his life. Suddenly, Tae-yong asked if Seung-cheon wanted to return to his old life. Filled with guilt over his father's death, Seung-cheon replied that he didn't have the right to choose and left the decision to Tae-yong. Later, Tae-yong took Seung-cheon's golden spoon back to Lee Jaul's room. He told Seung-cheon that he had found his real father, Yohan, who had died 20 years ago. Some time had passed, and Seung-cheon was now working hard to become a better person after his father's death. He was busy solving problems in the company, and because of his efforts, the stock value that had dropped was starting to rise again. The small shareholders, including his friends, were happy to see the share prices of the Dawson Group going up. Seung-cheon then decided to visit Alex Bu, who had always supported him. He invited Han-do to lunch at a convenience store, which surprised Han-do because of the change in his son's attitude. During lunch, Seung-cheon explained that he wanted to be a better person and put his family first. Han-do listened but urged Seung-cheon to return to his old self. He warned that this new personality might hold him back from becoming a successful businessman. After meeting with Seung-cheon, Han-do began to plan how to bring back his son's former attitude. That night, Joo-hee was with Seung-cheon while he worked on some company files. She expressed her concerns to him about the deaths of Jun-tae and her father, suggesting that Han-do might have used his influence to cover up the truth. Feeling worried, Seung-cheon immediately called Mun-ki to check on the investigation into Sang-guk's death. When Mun-ki entered the room, he reported that he hadn't found any clues yet. However, he mentioned that Yohan, who had died, was actually discovered by Han-do. Not long after, Seung-cheon called Tae-yong and urgently asked to meet. As Tae-yong walked towards their meeting place on a quiet street, he was followed by several mysterious men who suddenly attacked him. Fortunately, Seung-cheon saw what was happening. He and Mun-ki quickly rushed to help Tae-yong and tried to catch the attackers. Unfortunately, some of the men managed to escape. After the scuffle, Mun-ki explained that these men were trained, suggesting that someone might want to kidnap Tae-yong. Thinking it over, Seung-cheon started to suspect Han-do. He realized that Han-do, who was once known as Yohan, had swapped lives with the real Han-do using a golden spoon. Determined to find the truth, Seung-cheon asked Shi to keep an eye on Tae-yong. After that, he went to his office to search through Han-do's desk, hoping to find evidence to use against him for hurting the people he cared about. Soon after, Seung-cheon and Mun-ki headed to an empty building where Han-do was waiting for them. When they met, Seung-cheon addressed him by his real name, Kwon Yohan. In return, Han-do called Seung-cheon by his true name, admitting that he had known about the fortune swap with Tae-yong all along. Han-do then explained why he continued to use a golden spoon, even though he was born into a wealthy family. He believed that money was a powerful force that could change everything, and he wanted to rise to the highest position to earn even more. He was willing to eliminate anyone who got in his way, including Sang-guk, Joo-hee's father. Seung-cheon, disturbed by Han-do's madness, called him a monster. However, Han-do shot back, saying that Seung-cheon was also a monster like him. He then tried to persuade Seung-cheon to become his successor. Seung-cheon refused, stating that he had reported all of Han-do's crimes. Just then, a group of prosecutors arrived to arrest Seung-cheon, revealing that Han-do had framed him and placed all the blame on him. Luckily, Seung-cheon managed to escape just in time. At Joo-hee's office, she was shocked to see a news broadcast claiming that Seung-cheon had become a suspect in her father's murder case. Meanwhile, Tae-yong was trying to return his golden spoon and asked the old woman who sold antiques to give him back his money. A moment later, Tae-yong received a call from Yo-jin, who informed him about Seung-cheon's situation and how he had become a suspect in Sang-guk's murder. Furious, Tae-yong rushed to Han-do's house. When he met Han-do, he expressed all his frustrations and feelings, but Han-do blamed him for his principles, saying that they had turned him into a poor person. Tae-yong responded by saying he would rather be poor than become a killer like Han-do. Han-do calmly explained that Tae-yong wouldn't find any evidence, even if he wanted to know about Yohan's past. He added that Seung-cheon, like him, could no longer see the grandmother who sold golden spoons to switch places back with Taeyong. After hearing this, Taeyong decided to leave. Outside, he realized that Hyun-do probably didn't know the last rule about the golden spoon because he had never seen the antique dealer's grandmother again. Not long after, Taeyong immediately contacted Seung-cheon to share this information. When Seung-cheon received the call, he remembered the various antiques in the Alex Bu Museum that came from Hyun-do, and he hurried to the museum. Meanwhile, after trying to contact Seung-cheon several times without success, Jui decided to go look for him. On her way, she met Yeojin, who seemed worried about Seung-cheon's condition. Yeojin advised Juhi to ask Seung-cheon to switch places back with Taeyong. However, Juhi refused, explaining that if that happened, Taeyong would become the victim. At that moment, Seung-cheon was hiding at his real home with his mother, who was preparing food for him. Seung-cheon, still known as Taeyong, asked his mother why she was helping him. She replied that she believed he wasn't guilty of what the news was saying. Hearing this made him regret everything he had done. He wondered if he hadn't changed his fate. Would his father still be there to eat with him now? When the food was ready, Seung-cheon took out Hyun-do's golden spoon, which he had managed to grab earlier with Alex Bu's help. He used the spoon to eat his mother's cooking, and soon after, memories of Hyun-do flooded back to him. After finishing his dinner, Seung-cheon hugged his mother and called her mom before rushing out of the house. Sunhae cried, feeling a mix of emotions about how he treated her. With Hyun-do's memories now in his mind, Seung-cheon asked Jae and Taeyong to look for a recording in his father's files that showed when Johan, who is now Hyun-do, killed the real Hyun-do. While going through her father's belongings, Juhi received a call from her senior at work. She was shown a tape that recorded how Johan killed Hyun-do. Unfortunately, because the tape involved Hyun-do, the most powerful businessman in Korea, no one dared to turn it over to the police. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon, with Mun-ki's help, managed to get into Hyun-do's residence. When Hyun-do saw Seung-cheon calmly enjoying a cup of tea, he was surprised but tried to remain composed. However, he soon learned that all his secret money in the Swiss bank had been donated to the penitentiary. He was baffled, wondering how Seung-cheon could have done this since no one knew about his secret. Seung-cheon explained that Hyun-do had forgotten the golden spoon rule, which said it should not be used by others. When someone else uses his golden spoon, all of Hyun-do's memories as Johan become known. At that moment, Seung-cheon had no intention of killing Hyun-do. He remembered that Hyun-do had once been proud of his achievements and simply asked him to atone for his sins in prison. Finally, Hyun-do admitted that he was indeed proud of Seung-cheon. He hoped that if Seung-cheon were truly his son, he would continue the success of the Dawson Group. This surprised Seung-cheon, and in that moment, Hyun-do took the chance to attack him. Meanwhile, Yeojin, who was aware of the footage showing Hyun-do's murder, decided to upload the video on social media, making it a topic of conversation for many people. At Hyun-do's residence, Seung-cheon was gasping for breath after Hyun-do's attack. He felt weak and eventually fainted. Suddenly, he regained consciousness and in a burst of energy, struck Hyun-do with a display, causing blood to flow from Hyun-do's head. Just then, Taeyong arrived and tried to stop Seung-cheon, who was filled with anger and seemed ready to kill Hyun-do. When Hyun-do came to, he grabbed a vase and smashed it over Taeyong's head before attempting to escape through the back door. Outside, Hyun-do ran into Young-sin, who had secretly teamed up with Seung-cheon to get him arrested. She had called the police to report Hyun-do, and they arrived to take him away. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon decided to turn himself in for the charges of murder and embezzlement of funds from the Dawson Group. A few days later, Seung-cheon was released from jail because Mun-ki had found evidence proving his innocence, including the iron that Hyun-do used to kill Sang-guk. Jui, excited to hear that Seung-cheon was free, rushed to meet him. In the interrogation room, Hyun-do was furious. He ordered his personal assistant to kill Seung-cheon. Meanwhile, one of the servants at his residence was seen secretly mixing poison into Seung-cheon's drink. When Seung-cheon got home, he hurried to his room to retrieve his golden spoon. He noticed a glass of juice on the table that had been laced with poison. Just then, Young-sin entered Seung-cheon's room and let out a scream. Outside the house, Joo-hee was startled when an ambulance suddenly arrived, and everyone began to panic. In her haste, she ran into the house without noticing that she bumped into someone. When she reached Seung-cheon's room, she heard the devastating news that the only son of the Dawson group had died. She cried hysterically as she watched a man's body being loaded into the ambulance. 3 years have passed, and Taeyong has become a famous comic artist known for his stories about golden spoons. Seung-cheon's mother and older sister now live in an apartment with Mun-ki, who is Sung-hye's husband. Meanwhile, Joo-hee is at a restaurant with Taeyong, where Seung-cheon works. Seeing the closeness between Joo-hee and Taeyong, Seung-cheon playfully suggests that they should date. However, Joo-hee refuses, saying she considers Taeyong her best friend. While they eat, Taeyong expresses his wish to find a grandmother who sells antiques. He wants her to stop selling gold spoons because the golden spoon led to the death of Seung-cheon's father. At the same time, Yeojin is married to Jang-geun and has a child. In prison, Hyun-do, now in a wheelchair, is released after his sentence is suspended. He cannot move his body well because Young-sin secretly gave him medication while he was in prison. Young-sin reveals that she did this to take revenge on Hyun-do for the deaths of Jun-tae and her husband, Yohan. Hyun-do, who is actually Yohan, is shocked to learn that Jun-tae is his son. Switching back to Joo-hee, she tries to find Mr. Han, a gardener she is supposed to interview. When she arrives, a man tells her that Mr. Han is resting on the beach. Joo-hee heads to the beach and meets Mr. Han, who turns out to be Seung-cheon. However, Seung-cheon, now known as Mr. Han, cannot remember his past, and Joo-hee only knows him as Mr. Han. It is revealed that 3 years ago, during the tragic event of the Dawson group's only son's death, Seung-cheon had discouraged himself from drinking the poisoned drink. At the same time, Mr. Han used his golden spoon to swap his life with Seung-cheon. Mr. Han, now in the body of Seung-cheon, entered a room and drank the poison juice, which killed him. Meanwhile, Seung-cheon, living as Mr. Han, looked away and accidentally bumped into Joo-hee, not recognizing her. On the beach, Seung-cheon, who had been living as Mr. Han, expressed his wish to be recognized by the people he loved, even though he looked different and had a different name. Joo-hee remembered that Seung-cheon had said something similar before. Even though they didn't recognize each other, they enjoyed their time together that afternoon at the beach. The series ended with an old woman selling antiques, returning to her business of selling gold spoons. So the moral of the story is, don't drink juice you didn't make yourself, especially if it comes with a side of family drama and a golden spoon.